Christmas has always been more than tinsel and carols. Beneath the sparkling lights, the laughter, and the scent of pine, something older and colder waits in the shadows. It's the season of giving and joy. But sometimes, the magic of Christmas takes a darker turn, one whispered about only in hushed tones around the fire. This collection from our book, Creepy Christmas, was created to capture that unsettling side of the holiday. The crunch of snow underfoot, the eerie silence after the carolers leave, the feeling that someone, or something, is watching from just beyond the glow of the decorations. These are not cheerful tales or innocent ghost stories. Many are inspired by true events, folklore, and legends that have haunted families and towns for generations. The stories that are meant never to be spoken aloud on a winter's night. As you turn these pages, remember that Christmas isn't always safe. Beneath the glitter and gifts, there are shadows that do not fade. So, hang your stockings carefully, check the locks on your doors, and step inside. The stories are waiting. Christmas is supposed to smell like pine and sugar, feel warm and bright, and leave your heart light. But that day, it didn't. The mall at Christmas time is a sensory overload. Lights that look like tiny constellations, the caramel breath of the pretzel stand, the distant jangle of tinny music. I had dragged my son Owen in because he'd been talking about Santa for weeks. He'd been good. When you're a 5-year-old, good and not perfect are practically synonyms, but he'd kept his room tidy and used both napkins at dinner, and that was enough. We stood in the line, slow, warm bodies, parents juggling toddlers and grandparents with their own soft smiles, until it was our turn. The Santa on the throne was big and bearded, the costume rich and red, the props carefully staged, a sack, a sleigh backdrop, stockings. Owen hopped up onto the knee and chattered like light, rattle fast, about trains and dinosaurs. I stepped close for the photo and noticed something off, in a way that felt stupid and petty until I couldn't unsee it. This Santa, the one Owen sat on, wasn't the same man I'd seen the day before in another mall 2 towns over. The beard was real enough, but his voice had a thin edge, and there was a faint smell. Not the woodsy pine you expect on Santa, but something metallic beneath a cloying cologne. His eyes lingered when he asked for Owen's name, and then, unnervingly, for my address. "Do you live nearby?" he asked, smile plastic and practiced. I laughed it off. "A few miles? Why?" He shrugged, as if that explained nothing and everything. "Just checking. Sometimes I hand out special tokens in neighborhoods." He winked at Owen, who giggled and showed him a missing tooth. I should have left it there. Lots of people are odd. Lots of mall Santas are volunteers who only do a few shifts. Maybe the schedule changed and the man working now filled in yesterday's slot. Maybe I was being picky. We left with the photo. Owen slept in the car on the way home, cookie crumbs in his hair and a glitter fleck on his sleeve. I told myself the odd feeling had evaporated into the overheated air of the mall. But the next morning, when I walked Owen to the bus stop, I saw him. The man in the Santa suit, not the fake bearded afternoon mall photo version, but the real-looking suit he'd posed in for the picture, standing at the end of our cul-de-sac. He was still in costume, boots thick with slush, the red muffled under a gray windbreaker. He wasn't waving or handing out candy. He just stood and watched a house that wasn't ours. My stomach dropped. For a second I pictured the rational explanations, a charity drive, a last-minute parade, a neighbor in costume. But none of them fit. People don't wear mall costume suits in the cold and just stand on somebody's driveway. "Hey," I said out loud, which surprised me. I hadn't meant to speak. The man turned. His face was any face, yet something about his smile pulled wrong at the edges of the world. He called out, "Happy holidays. Nice day to be outside, huh?" "I thought you were somewhere else," I said. "Santa's a surprising gig to take on a weekday." He stepped forward and I noticed his hands. Clean, long fingers, a bandage on one knuckle. "I'm making rounds," he said. "Thought I'd check the neighborhood. Can't have kids missing out." His eyes flicked to Owen, who was now clambering out of the bus and sprinting to the house. Owen didn't seem to notice the man. It was just me and him exchanging glances. That evening, the man appeared again, this time on the porch. My front door was locked. The chain was on. I didn't open it. There was a knock. 3 short, then 1 long. Owen, asleep upstairs, stirred but didn't wake. The man's voice on the porch was soft. "I wanted to drop by. My name's Eddie. I'm filling in this season. I brought something for the good boy." I called out through the door, tight with adrenaline. "We don't know you. Please leave." There was a pause. "You can just open the door. I'll be quick." The voice had the kind of calm that makes you want to hand something over just to get the sound to stop. A sound like a faucet you can't reach. I texted a neighbor and then the police. The dispatcher asked the usual questions. Description, number. Is there an immediate threat? They told me to stay inside, lock the doors, and keep my phone on. I stood with my back to the door and a utility wrench in my hand like a sad, inadequate sword. The porch light flickered when the man moved, and in the glow I could see the hem of his red coat, damp with slush and slightly darker where it brushed against his pants. The knock came again, heavier, then a soft rapping like fingertips on wood. A voice tried to cajole. "It's Christmas. Don't be like that. Let me see the kid just for a second. Promise I won't be long." Time is elastic in those moments. My neighbor, Tom, did something I'll never forget. He opened his door across the street, saw the man and, without asking, stepped into his coat like a shield. He was an ex-firefighter, stocky and blunt, and he crossed his arms and said, "You've got to be kidding me. You staying put, or you want me to call my brother who will make you stay put?" The man smiled that brittle smile and took a step back. No harm," he said, and turned to leave. The police arrived within what felt like both an instant and an eternity. They asked questions. They took down descriptions. They drove off, telling us they'd patrol the area. They didn't arrest him. There was no crime yet beyond an unwelcome knock. The officers were professional, calm, and their breath steamed in the night air like ghosts. They said their job was to make a record, to respond if he returned. "We'll check back," one promised. He did return. Twice more over the next 3 days. Once, he left a wrapped candy cane hanging from our mailbox, tied with a glitter ribbon. Owen found it and hugged it like treasure, his small hands sticky with sweet. I threw it away and lied about it later, making up a story about how one of the kids on the block must have left it. I started to watch for patterns. He seemed to come when I was alone with Owen, when schedules were tight and small disruptions could be pushed aside. He'd linger at the street corner when I took the dog out late. He'd appear at holiday events, a silhouette in the crowd that disappeared when I turned my head. On Christmas Eve, the sense of dread became a physical thing. The house felt smaller. I kept every light on. I unplugged the doorbell and put towels under the back door. Owen had asked for a story in the living room, and I told it with too much gusto, trying to be light and blanketing the small living room with noise as if noise could ward off a person who'd been watching. At 10:13 p.m., there was a scrape at the side door. We both froze. Owen was too young to fully understand why I grabbed him and moved him to the hallway closet, where I'd stashed a flashlight and my phone. I told him to be very, very quiet, my voice shaking in a way I would hide from him later. He whispered, "Is Santa lost, Daddy?" He said it like a prayer. I heard the man's voice through the door, low and near. "Last chance. I won't stay long." Then the fragile, terrible laugh that sounds like a breaking thing. He tried the handle. The deadbolt held. He tapped the glass, softer this time. He said things that were meant to be casual, comments about holiday cookies, about how nice our decorations looked, little lies to put a shape of normal around himself. He knew our street number. He knew the name on the mailbox. He knew the brand of Owen's backpack. I called my neighbor Tom. The same ex-firefighter answered and came over without a question. He stood at the door with me while I dialed 911. The man outside rattled the handle and said, "Buddy, your neighbor's an ornament. Let me in. It's cold." He was crying now. a thin, wet sound that made the bones in my shoulders clench. When the officers came, they found footprints in the garden. Shoe prints, not boot prints, smaller than the boots he'd been wearing in the mall picture. They circled twice, looked at the porch camera footage, which showed a red blur and then static, and then took his description. No arrest, not enough. They promised to call if he returned. He did return. At 2:02 a.m., the knock was a single, long one. This time, he left a present on the top step. A small cardboard box, pristine, with a crease in the paper that only someone who wraps gifts carefully would know. He placed it with both hands and left, as if setting down something precious. My heart pounded. It felt as if the world had been narrowed to the box on my step and the shadow beyond the porch light. I told Tom to get his truck. I called the non-emergency again. The dispatcher asked whether I wanted an officer on scene while I opened the box if I chose to. My hands were numb as I lifted the lid. Inside was a Polaroid. It was of Owen, taken that day in the mall, mid-laugh, cookie in hand, glitter in his hair, the exact instant from our visit. Someone had come close enough to the life we were living to take a picture up close, to keep it, and then return it like proof. I screamed then, a raw animal sound I would later try to explain away at therapy as fear. It was the kind of fear that makes your voice small and thin with honesty. I put Owen in the closet and my hands shook as I shoved clothes around me, trying to make a sound buffer. The phone in my hand was slippery. At dawn, when the police finally had time to send a detective because the story had become a man in a Santa suit following a child, they tracked him through CCTV footage on the strip mall and a pawn shop transaction where a man in a red coat had pawned a watch and a ring. He'd rented a P.O. box. He'd looked up addresses. The detective's face grew harder as the facts stacked up. "He's a collector," she said. "A man who puts himself in places kids gather." She used clinical words that became weapons of cold logic in the throat of my panic. They found him 2 towns over on Boxing Day, in a motel room with a costume bag and a stack of Polaroids from different malls. He smelled of peppermint and something else. He didn't resist. His name, Eddie, was something ordinary and too human. When they cuffed him, his lip quivered like he was already rehearsing the line that would make him sound like a story rather than a monster. In interviews later, he told the detectives he'd been helping. He wanted to be the person who made wishes come true. He said he'd lost his own child years ago, and that wearing the suit let him be close to other children. He said he wanted to teach parents the lesson of appreciating what they had, because he knew what it was like to lose it. Those reasons didn't make sense to me. They never would. They did not explain the way he watched, the way he left seams of himself in places to be found like a breadcrumb map. They didn't explain the photos or the way he seemed to know our number and name. The state charged him with harassment and stalking. He was convicted on a rack of offenses at trial. They banned him from neighborhoods and monitored his movements for a while. In the months after, I slept poorly. I double-checked locks. I stopped answering politely when strangers knocked at my door. And yet, there are nights when I catch Owen looking at photographs and asking about Santa. He will be older now, 10, and his questions are softer. He asks whether that Santa was sad. He asks whether people can be helped. I tell him the truth, clipped and careful. Sometimes people hurt and make bad choices. Sometimes they are stopped. Then we bake cookies and hang a new ornament on the tree. One without glitter, one with plain wood. And he presses his small hand against it while we both breathe and remember that most Santas are just people who love to make others smile. The night outside felt heavier than usual. Snow had been falling steadily for hours, muting the world in a soft, suffocating silence. I was 6, curled up on the living room carpet, absorbed in cartoons that now seemed to echo too loudly in the empty house. My parents were out picking up last-minute groceries, and Daniel, my older brother, had locked himself in his room, blasting metal music so loud I could feel it vibrating through the floorboards. It was just the 2 of us in the house, or so I thought. I remember noticing the way the light from the television reflected off the snow outside the windows. It glowed like pale lanterns, shimmering across the ice-covered sidewalks. And then I saw it. At first, I thought it was a tree branch swaying in the wind, but something about the movement didn't make sense. It was deliberate, almost cautious. And then I saw him. A man in a floppy red hat, pausing at the edge of the snow, his form half hidden behind the thick snowfall. He wore a Santa suit that had seen better days. The beard curled awkwardly at the edges, yellowed and thin, not fluffy or soft as I had imagined. Over one shoulder hung a sagging red sack, heavy and lumpy, swaying slightly with each step. He didn't jingle or laugh. He didn't smell of cinnamon or pine. He just watched me. My stomach dropped. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong. His eyes were hollow, sunken, the yellowish hue of old teeth, not the bright, merry eyes I had seen in holiday movies. His face was pale and drawn, the kind of face that made you question if you wanted to look at it too long. And yet he did, staring, unblinking, calculating. I froze, the carpet pressing cold into my bare knees. I wanted to run, but my body refused. It was only then that I noticed the slow, deliberate motion of his hand, beckoning me toward the front door. A shiver ran down my spine so sharp it felt like ice water. "Hello, little boy. Merry Christmas. What's your name?" His voice was unnervingly cheerful, the kind of tone adults use when trying to hide irritation, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Michael," I said quietly, my throat tight, trying not to make a sound. My stomach knotted, twisting and pulling at itself. "Well, Michael," he said, dipping his hands into the sack, "I hear you've been very good this year, so I brought you a little present." The gift was neatly wrapped, perfect in its own wrong way, and my childish curiosity warred with terror. I imagined the toys inside, a race car, maybe a board game, but every instinct in me screamed not to reach for it. I think you came too early," I stammered, shaking. "You should come back at night and put it under the tree." His smile faltered just a fraction, and for a heartbeat, I thought I saw irritation, or maybe recognition that I wasn't a compliant target. "Come now, Michael, open up and get your present. It's a doozy." I backed away slowly, then remembered the screen door. It was thin, flimsy, but it was there. A barrier I could use. My hands shook as I unlocked it, my fingers trembling like brittle twigs. I didn't open the door. Not all the way. Not yet. That thin strip of wood and mesh felt like the only thing between me and someone who should never have been near. "Daniel, come down here, quick!" I shouted, my voice breaking. My mouth was dry, my tongue heavy. The music from above continued, oblivious, masking the terror I was trying to convey. The man's eyes widened, and in that instant, something primal flickered across his face. Irritation, maybe surprise. And then, he did something I'll never forget. He turned slowly, deliberately, and walked back toward a dark van parked in the driveway. The vehicle's outline was barely visible through the snowfall, but I could see the red taillights glowing like embers in the white night. In seconds, he was gone. Van sliding silently through the snow, leaving only the muffled crunch of tires fading into the distance. I stayed at the window long after, knees pressed to chest, staring at the glowing red lights until they disappeared completely. My heart raced. Every sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock, felt amplified, intrusive, menacing. I tried to make sense of it, to convince myself it wasn't real, but the memory of those hollow, sunken eyes and the sagging red sack burned into my mind. When my parents returned, I told them what had happened. They laughed at first, dismissing it as imagination, the exaggerations of a small child. But a few days later, the news hit. An 8-year-old boy in our town had disappeared while left alone for just 10 minutes. He was never found. My parents' laughter died immediately, replaced by a chilling silence that filled the house far more than snow or music ever could. Even years later, the memory remains vivid. I can picture the way his eyes lingered, the thin, crooked beard, the heavy sack sagging over his shoulder. The flimsy screen door, the only thing that kept me alive, remains in my mind as both barrier and guardian. Every Christmas, that night returns. The yellow eyes, the fake cheer, the silent vans slipping into the snowy darkness. They haunt me in ways no shadow or horror movie ever could. I survived by a thread, protected by vigilance and a thin screen door. And each year, as I see a Santa suit in a store or at a party, my stomach knots, my pulse quickens, and I remember what true danger can look like, hiding behind the symbols of joy, waiting for the slightest lapse in trust. It was December 2022, and Sophie had convinced me that what we really needed was a Christmas away from the noise of the city. Just us, no neighbors, no sirens, no office parties, a cabin, some snow, and quiet. Quiet. That word had sounded like medicine. The Pocono Mountains seemed perfect, just far enough to feel removed, but close enough that we could drive in a single day. We booked a cabin on Airbnb that looked almost too perfect. Icicle lights strung across the porch, a giant pine tree decorated in the living room, and a hot tub on a deck that overlooked the woods. The listing had dozens of glowing reviews about its storybook charm. But the photo that hooked me wasn't the tree or the hot tub. It was of the kitchen. Clean, modern, with a row of postcards pinned to the fridge by cheap magnets. One card in the center showed a snowy mountain scene, except someone had scratched out a face in the crowd with something sharp. I remember staring at it, thinking it was odd that the host hadn't removed it before photographing the place. Sophie laughed when I pointed it out. You and your eye for creepy details. I didn't laugh. Something about that defaced card clung to me. The drive was long, the roads narrowing as the city dissolved into endless forest. Snow had begun to fall by the time we reached the house, muffling everything except the crunch of our tires. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney. The porch railings were striped with candy cane lights, and 3 glowing reindeer stood stiffly in the yard. Sophie practically clapped when we stepped out of the car. Inside, the house smelled of pine and faint wood smoke, like a memory of childhood Christmases. It had 3 bedrooms, a loft, and a basement. I walked the rooms with a kind of practiced suspicion, checking locks, peering out windows, opening closet doors. Sophie teased me for being paranoid, but I couldn't help it. My father used to double-check every lock in our house 3 times before bed, a habit I'd inherited. Safety isn't paranoia, he always said. He died when I was 16, but those words lived with me. Everything looked fine, except the basement. The light switch hummed before flickering to life. The concrete floor was bare except for a single damp smear across it, like someone had dragged a wet boot. I crouched, touched it. Cold. Sophie leaned on the doorframe behind me. Everything good down there? Yeah, I lied, though the hair on my arms prickled. Later that night, while Sophie unpacked, I returned to the basement. The smear had darkened, as if it hadn't dried but deepened, and next to it, pressed faintly into the dust on the floor, was a handprint. Not from me, too wide. The fingers unusually long. I snapped off the light and shut the door harder than I meant to. As I set down our bags, a knock came at the front door. I opened it to find a man in his late 40s, gray sweatpants, and a worn yellow jacket. His hair was dark at the temples, but gray elsewhere, his smile warm. "Evening," he said. "I'm Jack. Live up the road. Help manage this place with my brother. Just checking in. Make sure you're settled." Something about the way his eyes lingered on the decorations inside made me uncomfortable, like he was cataloging them. Sophie appeared, cheerful, thanking him. Jack waved, then trudged down the snow-dusted path into the tree line. The moment the door shut, my stomach tightened. I didn't like how he'd looked at Sophie, or how his eyes had seemed to flick toward the fridge, as if he already knew about the postcards. That night, snow fell heavy, thick flakes dancing in the glow of the porch lights. We sat in the hot tub, steam rising around us, Christmas music playing faintly inside. For a moment, it was magical. Then the jet sputtered and died, leaving only silence. That's when we heard it. Footsteps crunching in the snow, slow, deliberate. Sophie froze. I squeezed her hand and forced a laugh. Probably a deer, but I knew the rhythm of those steps. Not wandering, not random, circling. We hurried inside, dripping, watching through the glass as the snow swallowed everything. Later, Sophie showered and yelped when the water turned icy mid-rinse. When I tried, it was the same, hot for seconds, then freezing. I texted Mike, the host. "Water heater dead. Can someone check tomorrow?" His reply came minutes later. "Sorry, I'll send maintenance in the morning." I wanted to ask if maintenance meant Jack, but didn't. At 3 a.m., 3 heavy knocks rattled the front door. Sophie clutched my arm. "Don't," she whispered when I started to get up. I froze, heart hammering. Then, against every instinct, I crept to the window by the stairs. The curtain was thin. Through a gap, I saw a figure on the porch. Motionless. It was Jack. He wasn't knocking anymore. He was standing, head tilted slightly like he was listening to something inside. Then his lips moved. My blood iced over. He whispered my name. I staggered back, slamming the bedroom door. Sophie cried silently against my shoulder as we listened to the faint crunch of footsteps retreating. Snow had piled knee-deep overnight. Footprints circled the house, some leading into the woods, some stopping inexplicably in the middle of the yard. As I brushed snow off the Jeep, Jack appeared casually from the tree line. "Morning," he said. "Heard you had water trouble. I'll check the heater." Every nerve screamed no. I texted Mike again. "Jack is here. Says he's checking the heater." His reply was instant. "Wait. Jack? Who's Jack?" The blood drained from my face. I typed quickly. "The man who said he manages the cabin with his brother. Came last night too." Mike's answer. "I don't have a brother named Jack." Panic surged. I grabbed Sophie. "We're leaving, now." We shoved our bags into the Jeep. Snow spun off the tires as I turned the ignition. That's when I saw him. Jack, standing at the edge of the woods, watching. His expression unreadable. I floored it, the Jeep fishtailing down the icy road. Sophie sobbed beside me, clutching my arm. But then, something snapped bright in the rearview mirror. A flash, like a camera. I glanced back. Jack stood in the road, arm raised, something metallic glinting in his hand. I didn't slow. On the main road, we called Mike, who promised to notify the police. Hours later, they confirmed no one had been found. No footprints besides ours and wildlife. But the memory gnawed. The handprint in the basement, the whisper of my name, the flash of a camera. For weeks, Sophie refused to talk about it. I couldn't sleep. Every knock at the door jolted me upright. And then, 2 months later, I got a text from an unknown number. No words, just a photo. It was Sophie and me, sleeping in the cabin bed, taken from outside the window. The timestamp in the corner read 3:04 a.m. Christmas Eve. When I was a kid, I saw something on Christmas Eve that has haunted me for my entire life. I was still young enough to fully believe in Santa, so when my parents tucked me into bed that night, I didn't fall asleep. I pressed my face to the cold glass of my bedroom window, hoping, half in awe and half in childish impatience, to catch a glimpse of his sleigh landing on the rooftops, the twinkle of the reindeer harnesses sparkling in the night sky. The world outside looked magical. Snow dusted the roofs, reflecting the soft golden glow of the streetlights, making the neighborhood look like it had been painted for a holiday card. I noticed small oddities that night, little details that should have been comforting but somehow unsettled me. Across the street, the Johnsons' living room lights flickered unusually, and I thought I could hear a faint, irregular thump, like the pulse of the house itself. I told myself it was just the heating system, or a loose shutter rattling in the wind. Still, a tiny, cold knot of unease twisted in my stomach. At first, it was all magic in my mind. The soft shimmer of snowflakes, the occasional twinkle of a distant Christmas light, the muffled sounds of carolers far down the street blending with the faint hum of traffic. But then, as I squinted, I realized I could see into my neighbor's bedroom across the way. The room was dim, lit only by the flickering glow of a TV that cast strange, uneven shadows across the walls. On the bed, I could make out the shape of a person under the covers, seemingly asleep. My mind reassured me. It's just curiosity, nothing more. I was just looking for holiday magic. And then the movement started. At first, I thought he was simply adjusting the blankets or shaking his wife awake gently. But my stomach twisted as the motion became too fast, too deliberate, too violent. My chest felt frozen, my throat tight, as the horrifying truth crept into my mind. He wasn't moving her gently. He was attacking her. Panic surged through me. My eyes stayed glued to the scene, unable to look away. I could see enough. Too much. The way he struck her, over and over, deliberate, precise, terrifying. My small hands clenched into fists. My legs felt like they were made of lead, yet I bolted down the stairs as fast as I could, bursting into the living room. "Mom! Dad! The neighbor! He's hurting his wife!" I shouted, voice trembling, heart hammering in my chest. My dad jumped to his feet, likely thinking I had misunderstood what I had seen. We ran back to the window together, but the curtains had been drawn. He crouched beside me, voice tense. "Buddy, are you sure? Could it have been a nightmare?" I nodded emphatically, trying to steady my voice, insisting I had seen everything. The violent motions, the glint of something sharp, the horrifying reality of what he was doing. My mom appeared behind us, pale, lips pressed tight together, eyes wide and unblinking. They exchanged a look I will never forget, a silent, urgent conversation that said more than words ever could. "Better safe than sorry," she said firmly, her voice low but commanding. "We're calling the police." The call felt eternal. I sat there, stomach twisting, fingers gripping the edge of the window ledge, listening to the faint hum of the phone line, hearing only my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. Minutes later, sirens pierced the night like a physical force, their flashing red and blue lights painting our living room walls in harsh, strobing bursts. I felt the vibrations of the engines through the floorboards, smelled the faint acrid smoke from the siren's exhaust, mixing with the crisp winter air, and shivered violently. I watched, frozen, as the officers moved quickly, circling the house, flashlights cutting through the darkness, knocking on doors, shouting commands. My parents guided me to get dressed in a haze of fear and urgency. We were evacuating, just in case things turned violent. I remember trembling, clinging to my mother's hand, my teeth chattering as if the winter had frozen my bones. The world felt unreal, like I had stepped into a nightmare painted over familiar streets. The entire neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. Snow fell silently, blanketing the chaos in a soft, mocking calm. Christmas lights twinkled innocently as if nothing had changed, but the tension in the air was suffocating. Neighbors emerged cautiously, some clutching phones, others standing in disbelief, whispering questions that went unanswered. I could hear muffled sobs from across the street. The metallic scent of panic hung in the cold air. My parents kept a protective arm around me as we watched the scene unfold, our hearts hammering in unison with the flashing lights. And then, it was over. The police finally announced what had happened. Our neighbor had taken his own life. Upstairs in the bedroom I had glimpsed from my window lay his wife, stabbed repeatedly more than 30 times. My stomach lurched, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I hadn't imagined it. That fleeting glimpse from my window, the violence, the deliberate cruelty, had been real. In those few seconds I had watched, it wasn't an argument, not a scuffle. It was murder. My parents tried to shield me from the full truth at first, knowing my young mind couldn't handle it. But eventually, I learned what had really happened. The darkness of that Christmas Eve, the violence, the betrayal hiding behind a familiar neighbor's face, stayed with me, reshaping my view of the world in ways I didn't understand at the time. For years afterward, I lived with an uneasy awareness of the fragility of safety. People who smile in your driveway, who wave hello and seem kind, can still be capable of unspeakable evil. Even familiar faces, familiar homes, familiar holidays. They can harbor nightmares. It took me until my early 20s to feel safe again, to convince myself that not every shadow hid a monster, that not every friendly smile masked danger, that Christmas Eve taught me something I will never forget. Evil often hides behind ordinary, familiar faces, and sometimes the most horrifying events happen when you least expect them. When the snow falls gently, the lights twinkle, and the world seems perfectly safe. And as I walked past that quiet street decades later, a lingering thought tickled the back of my mind. The night hadn't ended with the sirens, because some shadows never truly leave. It was Christmas Eve, 1997, and I was 7 years old. For most kids, the night sparkled with lights, the air filled with the scent of pine, sugar cookies, and the excited rustle of wrapping paper. For me and my little sister, it was just another ordinary night. Our family was Jewish, so Christmas held no special meaning for us. The neighborhood hummed with distant carols and the faint glow of decorated windows, but inside our house, everything felt muted and heavy. My dad, a doctor, was on call at the hospital, which meant he wouldn't be home. Mom was at home, but back then, she struggled with alcoholism. By nightfall, she was often somewhere between sleep and unconsciousness, curled on the couch with a half-empty bottle nearby. I didn't fully understand her condition, only that after dark, she became almost impossible to wake. My sister and I had learned early to fend for ourselves during these nights, navigating the shadows of our own home as quietly as possible, like we were always on tiptoe over an invisible edge. That evening, the TV flickered in the living room as my sister and I sat cross-legged on the carpet, sharing a bag of stale chips. The wind rattled the windows, carrying the distant laughter of children and the occasional bark of a dog. Then, a soft knock sounded at the door. I froze. My heart skipped. Another knock, louder this time, followed by a cheerful sing-song voice. "Hey kid, it's me, Santa. Open the door and I'll give you your presents." I pressed my face against the glass panes, squinting through the dim porch light. There he was, a man in a Santa suit, fake beard slightly crooked, carrying a large, bulging red bag over his shoulder. He waved with exaggerated cheerfulness. At 7, I didn't believe in Santa, but the idea of a stranger in the dead of night, standing right outside our door, sent icy fingers crawling down my spine. "Santa isn't real," I said firmly. "And even if you were, you don't give presents to Jewish kids." For a moment, the man's smile faltered. Then, almost imperceptibly, irritation flickered across his eyes. "Of course I'm real. I used to only visit Christian homes, but this year I'm changing the rules. Jewish kids deserve gifts too." I shook my head, gripping my sister's hand. "We celebrate Hanukkah, not Christmas. Go away." His cheerful tone dissolved entirely, replaced by something sharper, insistent. "Open the door now, or you'll regret it." Panic pooled in my stomach. My sister whimpered, clutching my arm. "Call 911, I whispered urgently. She fumbled with the phone, her fingers trembling so badly she nearly dropped it. Outside, I could hear the man muttering angrily, shifting his weight as if preparing to force the door. When the operator answered, I tried to explain, my voice shaking. "There's a man dressed as Santa at our door. He's trying to get in." The voice on the other end stayed calm, but I could hear the doubt. "Okay, sweetheart. I understand. I'll log the call. Officers are busy tonight, though. It might take some time for them to get to you. Just stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone." "Please hurry," I begged. "He's right here. He's trying to get in." "I'll send someone as soon as I can," she said, and then the line went quiet. Not cut off, not dismissive, just a chilling promise that help was delayed. We were on our own. My sister's sobs filled the small living room. I scanned the space frantically, looking for anything at all that could help. My eyes landed on the menorah on the table. The candles were unlit, but an idea sparked in my mind. A desperate, risky idea. I grabbed every candle from the menorah and a few extras from the kitchen. Lighting them quickly, I blew them out, letting the smoke curl upward toward the ceiling. The smoke detector shrieked almost instantly, shattering the tense silence that had pressed against my ears like a heavy blanket. Outside, the man froze. I could see him through the glass, his Santa face twisted with confusion and anger. The faint wail of sirens began in the distance, growing steadily louder. Relief mixed with fear in my chest. What if he tried the door before the firefighters arrived? When the fire crew pulled up, their lights strobed across the street, casting the neighborhood in red and blue flashes. My stomach churned violently. The man didn't flee. He stood at the door, shouting, claiming he was our dad in a Santa suit, trying to save us from a fire. He gestured wildly toward the bag slung over his shoulder. One firefighter approached, apparently unsure. He raised his tools, preparing to force the door. I shouted, my voice cracking, "He's lying! That's not our dad!" My sister's crying became louder, desperate, banging on the door to prove the fear was real. "Dad's at the hospital. We don't even celebrate Christmas." The firefighter hesitated. I pointed to our menorah and kippah, our symbols of faith that lay scattered on the table. The truth seemed to click in his mind. The man's lies began to unravel. Finally, 2 firefighters restrained him while another called the police. Minutes dragged like hours. The man struggled, his face red with frustration and fury, but he could not get inside. When the police arrived, they took over. The man was hauled away, shouting curses over his shoulder. Inside, I clutched my sister, shaking uncontrollably. My throat ached from shouting. My hands still smelled of smoke from the candles. Even after the man was gone, I felt like the house wasn't safe anymore. The police officer assigned to us crouched low to our level, his voice careful, deliberate. "You kids did good. Really good. You stayed calm. You thought fast. That was brave." I didn't feel brave. My sister's small body trembled in my arms. We both jumped every time a floorboard creaked. They asked questions. What he said, what he looked like, if we'd seen him before. I shook my head until my neck hurt. Every detail felt burned into me. The crooked beard, the too wide smile, the way his voice sharpened like broken glass. When my dad finally came through the front door, his uniform disheveled, his eyes wide, relief replaced his initial anger at my mother's absence. He hugged us so tightly I could barely breathe, whispering that we were safe now. His voice cracked, something I had never heard from him before. The officers stayed with us for over an hour, walking the perimeter of the house, checking each lock and corner. They reassured us the man would be processed and charged. They didn't promise he'd never come back, and that silence was louder than anything they said. That night, I didn't sleep. Neither did my sister. We sat huddled in the hallway with every light on, whispering to each other in bursts, too afraid of the silence pressing in. My mother stirred once, blearily confused, but even then, she couldn't really be there for us. It was just me and my sister, 2 small sentinels waiting for daylight. Years later, I still think about that night with a shiver. It wasn't magic or miracles that protected us. It was vigilance, courage, and a bit of luck. The memory sticks with me every Christmas Eve, a stark reminder of how fragile safety can be, and how quickly the world can turn frighteningly wrong. Even now, when I see a Santa suit in a store window or hear carolers walking past, I can't help but glance over my shoulder, half expecting him to be there again, waiting, smiling, insisting that this year he'll get inside. The terror lingers, subtle but persistent, like the echo of distant sirens that never truly fade. Some Christmases you remember for joy and laughter. Others, you never forget because they teach you the raw, terrifying reality of fear. And for me, 26 years into my life, the Christmas Eve I spent alone in a small West Virginia town became one of those nights. I had always been independent. My family lived across the country, and my work schedule rarely gave me room for holidays. That year, it was no different. The town I lived in was small, quiet and bordered by dense, shadowed woods. My house sat on the edge of a semi-desolate area, far enough from neighbors that the only noises were the rustling trees, the occasional distant animal, and the odd squeak of my own creaking floors. I arrived home around 8 p.m., exhausted from a 12-hour shift. Dinner was little more than reheated leftovers, eaten hastily at the kitchen counter while I tried to ignore the unnerving stillness that seemed to press in from the walls. Outside, snow had begun to fall lightly, muffling even the faintest sounds, which made the silence inside feel even heavier. I told myself it was just Christmas Eve quiet. No reason to be unsettled. By 9 p.m., sleep was tugging at me insistently, coaxing me toward the basement bedroom I had turned into my sanctuary. That's where I planned to spend the night, wrapped in blankets, the soft hum of a space heater offering comfort against the chill. But just as my eyes closed, a sound froze me in place. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, impossibly heavy, echoing from the main floor above. My basement was designed to muffle ordinary household sounds, yet this wasn't ordinary. It was methodical, almost predatory. I froze, mind racing. Could it be my friend? Occasionally he stayed over after late shifts, and he had a key, but he always texted first. I grabbed my phone. No notifications, not a single message. Panic climbed my spine, cold and suffocating. I tiptoed to the bottom of the stairs, whispering his name. Silence answered. Then, the footsteps responded. They accelerated, crashing across the floor, banging into furniture, slamming doors. My stomach dropped. This wasn't my friend. Instinct overrode fear. I darted into the crawl space under the stairs, a low, dusty space I had always avoided, and pressed myself into the shadows. I tried to control my breathing, listening as whoever was above moved methodically through my home. Drawers slammed, cabinets rattled, objects tumbled. Every sound felt like a countdown to discovery. Minutes stretched endlessly. My heart pounded so loudly it threatened to give me away. My mind ran over scenarios of defense, or the lack thereof. I had nothing. No weapons, no escape, no plan. Every crash made me flinch, imagining the intruder turning the corner at any moment. Then, a scream, a frustrated guttural shout that bounced off the walls, shook me from my thoughts. The footsteps retreated, pounding up the stairs. My muscles stayed rigid, frozen in terror. I waited, too afraid to move. 2 hours passed in that crawl space, broken only by intermittent chaos from above. Whoever it was, they knew my house intimately, yet their motives remained inscrutable. Finally, a long silence fell. I edged out, peeking into the basement. Chaos had erupted. Furniture overturned, drawers emptied, belongings scattered. My phone, untouched on the nightstand, was my only lifeline. I grabbed it and huddled back in the crawl space, hands trembling, dialing the police. The weight was excruciating. Every floorboard creak, every whistle of wind outside, made me flinch. When the flashing lights finally pierced the windows, I felt a fragile relief. Officers swept through the house with caution, flashlights illuminating every shadow. They found nothing. The intruder had vanished. The sliding glass door in the back had been pried open, yet beyond that, no trace remained. The officers advised me to stay elsewhere until the home was secured. I spent the rest of the night at a friend's house, replaying every horrifying moment. Questions without answers swirled in my mind. Who? Why? What had they wanted? The sense of being hunted lingered long after. Returning home the next morning, Christmas lights glinting in the snow, I was greeted by the aftermath, scattered belongings, overturned furniture, and the haunting sense of eyes lingering in the corners. Shadows seemed to darken in ways that weren't natural. Floorboards creaked when nothing moved, and the faintest draft felt like a warning. Over the next weeks, I discovered small, unnerving details. Items subtly rearranged as if someone had been studying my habits. Footprints in the basement dust that didn't match my own, and strange marks on the inside of drawers. Nothing was stolen. Nothing seemed missing. Yet the message was clear. This was personal. The intruder wasn't there for money. They were there to know me, understand me, frighten me. The climax of that night haunted me vividly. At one point, I heard the heavy footfall pause directly above the crawl space. The intruder crouched, breathing audible, as if sensing my presence. A floorboard creaked under me, and for a moment, I thought discovery was inevitable. I imagined their eyes boring into mine, reaching for me through the thin floorboards. My chest froze, every nerve alive. Then, slowly, footsteps retreated, deliberately, almost taunting. That moment, suspended in the dark, taught me fear in a way I will never forget. I reinforced every lock, installed cameras, and yet the feeling never left. Every shadow, every noise, every unexpected creak reminded me that someone had been inside my sanctuary. Someone who had known precisely where to look and how to terrify me. Even years later, the memory is sharp. I remember the panic, the helplessness, the knowledge that someone had crossed into my life with purpose unknown. Christmas, once a time of warmth, had become a night of unrelenting dread. Now, whenever I walk past a window, hear an odd sound, or feel a floorboard shift, I recall the crawl space Christmas. Not the festive lights or the cheerful carols, but the suffocating terror, the intruder's methodical search, and the fragile veneer of safety that shattered in hours. And somewhere, perhaps, the person who invaded my home still exists, waiting, patient, and deliberate. Christmas may come once a year, but terror, once etched into memory, never fades. I've had my share of strange and frightening experiences, but one Christmas stands out above all the rest. Even now, every holiday, when someone hands me a gift, my heart skips a beat, and I pause, imagining what might be inside. I was 10 years old that year, and it was the last Christmas I spent with my cat, Muffin. She was small, energetic, and endlessly curious, rescued from the street by my mom and me. Muffin spent her days darting through the house, leaping at shadows, and startling us all with sudden bursts of energy. She was particularly fond of jumping onto counters, swiping at dangling ornaments, and curling up on laps at the most inconvenient times. But I loved her with all my heart. Some nights, I would watch her chase the dim moonlight through the living room window, her eyes reflecting it like two tiny lanterns. On colder nights, she would burrow into my blankets, kneading at my chest, purring as if nothing else in the world existed except her warmth and my heartbeat. That Christmas in Syracuse brought one of the heaviest snowfalls I had ever seen. Christmas Eve covered the streets and houses in thick, glistening white. By afternoon, drifts had piled against our front door, making the world outside appear hushed and untouchable, like a snow globe frozen in time. Inside, our house smelled like roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing, ham, and the faint sweetness of fruitcake. Eggnog and hot chocolate sat steaming on the counter, filling the air with warmth. The fire in the living room crackled in cozy, irregular bursts. We were finishing dinner when the doorbell rang. The timing felt strange. With the neighborhood's annual Christmas gathering canceled due to the storm, no visitors were expected. My dad went to answer it, expecting maybe a neighbor or a last-minute delivery. But when he opened the door, there was no one there. Silence stretched across the porch. The snow crunched lightly under some invisible presence, or maybe it was just the wind, but the stillness felt wrong. My breath fogged in the cold air, forming shapes that lingered briefly before vanishing. He shut the door slowly, looking puzzled. Muffin hissed at the empty doorway, her ears flat, and refused to leave my side. When my dad returned, he held a small square package wrapped in shiny red paper with a green bow. A tiny card attached read, "Merry Christmas, Alex. Someone left this for you," he said. "Looks like a secret admirer." I was confused. I hadn't expected any gifts from anyone outside my family. Inside the box was a cookie jar, not a normal one, but shaped like the Grinch's head. Its painted expression was twisted, almost grotesque, with a grin that seemed too sharp, too exaggerated. The eyes, painted yellow with black pupils, somehow felt unnervingly lifelike. My mom commented that it looked a little creepy. I agreed. But curiosity got the better of me, and I carefully took a cookie. It was rich, soft, and delicious. For a while, the unease faded, replaced by sugar-induced comfort. As the night deepened, I tried to sleep, but sleep eluded me. Shadows seemed to shift in odd ways, bending around the furniture as if hiding from the light. The faint sound of snow sliding off the roof echoed, amplified in the dead silence. Muffin lay at the foot of my bed, ears twitching constantly. Every time a floorboard creaked or a gust rattled the windows, she bolted upright, hair bristling. I told myself it was just a stormy night, that the house settling and the wind howling was all natural. Yet, a creeping feeling gnawed at the back of my mind. Something was off. Around midnight, I woke again, thirsty. The hallways were dark, and the light from the fireplace in the living room barely reached the stairs. I stepped cautiously toward the kitchen, muffling my footsteps, though it was useless. Each creak sounded thunderous in the stillness. That's when I saw it. At the bottom of the stairs crouched a figure. Its yellow eyes glimmered in the dim light, unblinking and cold. The face. It looked like the Grinch on the cookie jar, filthy, twisted, and impossibly alive. Its mouth moved slightly, as if tasting the air, a sinister grin stretching wider than any human expression could allow. My limbs froze, my chest tightened. Panic surged like icy water through my veins. Muffin hissed and arched her back, fur on end, the tiny sound sharp enough to slice through the silence. I ran toward my parents' room, heart pounding, hearing heavy, uneven footsteps behind me. Each step echoed unnervingly through the wooden floors, slower than mine, deliberate, calculating. My legs shook, my throat burned with unshed screams. I slammed into the bedroom door and cried, shaking uncontrollably. "It's real! The Grinch!" I sobbed. My mom tried to calm me, pulling me close. My dad searched every corner of the house. By morning, nothing remained. The cookie jar sat harmless on the counter in daylight, its painted grin now ordinary, its eyes dull. I refused to touch it again. Eventually, my mom gave it away to the neighbor children, hoping it would remove the shadow it had cast over our home. But it wasn't over. A week later, I saw the cookie jar back on the kitchen counter. My stomach dropped. "Mom, who put this here?" I asked, voice trembling. She looked confused, and my dad shook his head. Neither of them had moved it. That night, the situation escalated. I followed my mom sleepwalking down the stairs. She moved stiffly, her long hair swaying, the white nightgown brushing the floor. The moonlight outside streamed through the window, casting elongated shadows that made her look taller, stranger, almost inhuman. Her eyes caught the light in a way that glimmered unnervingly, like the cookie jar's eyes had somehow jumped to her face. Muffin darted toward her, hissing, but my mom didn't react. I felt paralyzed, unable to move, my heart hammering against my ribs. The air felt thick, charged with a presence I could not name. Then she tripped. I screamed, but my voice was swallowed by the vast, silent house, and I watched as she fell, a soundless tumble that ended with a sickening thud. Muffin was caught in the accident, her tiny body still. The next moments blurred into panic, chaos, and the shrill cry of my dad finding me. I fainted. When I came to, I was in the hospital. My dad sat beside me, tears in his eyes, holding my hand. He explained that my mom had fallen during a sleepwalking episode, and Muffin had been fatally injured. Everyone else thought it was a tragic accident, but I knew that night had left something behind. Something that stole our sense of safety and innocence. The cookie jar disappeared soon after, but the memory never left. The fear did not fade. The sound of snow crunching, the flicker of a shadow, or even a faint yellow glimmer in a toy's eye could still send chills crawling down my spine. Years later, I moved to Nebraska with my wife and daughter. The holidays should have been a comfort, a chance to make new memories. Yet every Christmas, when someone hands me a gift, my chest tightens. The smell of cookies, the rustle of wrapping paper, even the soft padding of my daughter's small feet on the wooden floor. All of it reminds me of Muffin's hisses, the twisted grin, and the Christmas that the Grinch stole. Not just presents, but peace, safety, and innocence forever. Even now, on quiet nights, I sometimes hear the faintest creak of a floorboard behind me. And I know, somewhere deep in the shadows, the grin still waits. Christmas 2017 was meant to be a fresh start for my husband and me. We had just moved into a quiet suburban neighborhood, far removed from the chaos of the city. Our new home wasn't flawless, but it was ours. The creaking wooden floors, the cozy front porch, and sunlight spilling through the windows made it feel like a sanctuary, a place to build new memories and dreams. Finally, we could breathe, unpack, and settle into a peaceful life. After a long day of hauling boxes and arranging furniture, I finally treated myself to a warm cup of tea. The air outside was sharp and cold, and the steam rising from the mug felt like a small comfort against it. On a whim, I decided to step onto the balcony above the living room to catch the fading sunset. The view took my breath away. Snow blanketed the rooftops, making them look like frosted gingerbread houses, while Christmas lights twinkled in every window, their reflections glimmering on icy sidewalks. A soft chorus of carols floated through the night air, distant but soothing. For the first time in weeks, I felt a genuine sense of calm. But my gaze lingered on the house next door. A man and woman were on their balcony, voices raised in heated argument. The man's face was flushed, his arms gesturing violently, while the woman's hands balled into fists, her voice sharp and cutting. Though I couldn't catch the words, the raw intensity of anger sent a shiver down my spine. I reminded myself it wasn't my business, yet the scene haunted me long after I returned inside. The next morning, our home felt warm and inviting. Cinnamon-scented candles filled the air, and I wanted to spread that warmth to the neighborhood. I decided to host a Christmas Eve dinner, a chance to connect with neighbors and embrace the holiday spirit. Among other tasks, I realized we didn't yet have a Christmas tree, and the living room felt empty without one. Later that day, I trudged through the freshly fallen snow in search of the perfect tree. Each crunch of ice underfoot sounded louder than it should, as if the neighborhood itself were holding its breath. Passing the neighbor's house again, I glimpsed the couple through the frost-specked windows. The woman's voice was sharp, slicing through the cold night air. The man's anger seemed almost tangible. My curiosity pressed against my chest, and a chill ran down my spine. I hurried home, eager to leave the confrontation behind. Back in our living room, the Christmas tree sparkled in soft light, ornaments reflecting the glow of string lights. Determined to be friendly, I wrapped myself in scarf and coat and walked to the neighbor's door. Their doorbell was broken, so I knocked. After what felt like an eternity, the man opened the door. His hair was disheveled, dark circles shadowed his eyes, and there was a tense rigidity in his posture. "I'm hosting a Christmas Eve dinner," I said, trying to keep my voice light, though nerves tingled at the edges. "You and your wife are invited." "My wife isn't here," he replied flatly. "I'll go by myself." His words were matter-of-fact, yet something in his tone twisted my stomach into knots. Then I noticed the floor behind him, a dark, glistening pool that reflected the dim hallway light. My breath caught. He didn't acknowledge it. He just stared at me, expression unreadable, before slamming the door. Christmas Eve arrived, filled with warmth, laughter, and the scent of roasted turkey. Our home glowed with candlelight as neighbors shared stories, drank cider, and exchanged cheerful banter. Yet the couple from next door never appeared. The memory of that dark liquid haunted me, overshadowing the festive atmosphere like a shadow in sunlight. Late that night, sleep refused me. I found myself peering through the curtains toward the neighbor's house, half expecting to see movement in the empty windows. Hours passed in tense silence, the only sounds the distant wind brushing icy branches. Around 1:13 a.m., a sudden thud shattered the stillness, followed by another, heavier, closer. My book slipped from my hands as adrenaline shot through me. I crept to the door, peered through the peephole, and froze. The man from next door stood on our porch, breath fogging in the cold air. A gun gleamed in his hands, the barrel aimed too steadily, too calmly. My hands trembled as I dialed 911, whispering the situation. The seconds stretched, each one dripping with terror. Police arrived swiftly, circling him, taking the weapon, and placing handcuffs on his wrists. As he was led away, he shouted over his shoulder, "You killed my wife, and I will kill you next." I was taken in for questioning, accused initially by his claims, but after hours, I was cleared. Officers then entered the house next door. One emerged, pale and shaking. He confirmed my fears. The woman had been murdered, suspended from a rope, her head injured, blood pooled on the floor, the exact site I had glimpsed days earlier. Weeks passed, but the images refused to fade. Every creak of the floor, flicker of light, or shadow on the curtains seemed to echo her presence. On quiet nights, I could almost hear whispers drifting from the dark house, see faint shapes flitting behind curtains. One evening, a neighbor mentioned seeing the lights on upstairs flicker at odd times, even though the house was supposedly empty. Another swore they glimpsed a figure standing in the window, watching silently. My heart raced at each retelling, dread coiling tighter in my chest. Months later, during a quiet winter evening, I stood once more on my balcony. Snow coated the rooftops. Lights twinkled in cheerful defiance. Yet across the street, the house next door remained dark, silent, lifeless. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. Shadows shifted where no light fell. A cold draft brushed my cheek, carrying faint murmurs, and I knew, deep down, that some part of that house's horror had not yet left. That Christmas changed everything. I learned how fragile the boundary between safety and terror could be, and how even in a quiet, peaceful neighborhood, horror could arrive uninvited, leaving scars that time could not erase. The streetlight hummed faintly, and the snowflakes seemed to hang mid-air, listening. Each one drifted down, slow, patient, catching in the yellow glow before dissolving into darkness. The neighborhood was so quiet it felt staged, like the world had pressed pause. From inside our house, warm with cinnamon and colored lights, it should have felt safe. But that night, and the nights that followed, I learned silence isn't peace. It's a stage waiting for something to step into the light. It was the week before Christmas, just after 11. My sister Ava and I were sprawled across Mom's bed, half watching some sitcom rerun. The small Christmas tree in the corner flickered, lights blinking in uneven rhythm. Mom was reading a magazine, her glasses sliding down her nose, her hair pulled up in a messy bun. For once, the house was calm. No arguments about money, no tension about Dad's long shifts at the hospital. Just 3 people in the same room, pretending things were simple. Mom stretched, sighed, and asked if one of us would grab her a water bottle. "Not it," Ava said immediately, burrowing deeper under the blanket. "They're in the car," Mom added, like she already knew what the protest would be. She'd banned Dad's habit of leaving bottles everywhere, so the stash stayed in the van outside. I didn't bother arguing. I grabbed the keys and slipped into my shoes. The cold slapped me as soon as I stepped outside. My breath puffed out in little white clouds, and the snow clung to my lashes, melting into cold trickles down my cheeks. I unlocked the van, leaned in to grab 2 bottles, and that's when I noticed him. At first, I thought it was just another neighbor heading home late, but no one in our block lingered in the street at that hour, not in the freezing cold. He was tall, broad, standing dead center under the weak streetlight. He didn't move, didn't shift his weight, didn't even raise a hand to block the snow. He just stared, motionless. A prickling chill ran up my spine. I slammed the van shut and hurried back toward the gate, my heart hammering. I told myself not to look back, but I couldn't help it. He was still there, watching. I bolted up the driveway, locked the door behind me, and dropped the keys with shaking hands. Mom looked up from her magazine. "What's wrong?" There's a man outside," I stammered. She sat up immediately, face pale. She dialed Dad, who promised to come home as soon as he could. When his headlights finally cut across the driveway nearly an hour later, the man was still there. My stomach dropped. I hadn't imagined it. Dad stepped out of the car, steady, calm like always. "Hey, do you need some help?" he called into the night. The man didn't answer. He simply stepped backward, out of the streetlight, dissolving into the shadows as though he'd never been there at all. The next evening, Christmas Eve, I begged not to go outside at all, but Grandma had asked me to bring cash to a neighbor 2 houses down. Ava, braver than me, offered to take it. "I'll go. You just keep watch," she said, trying to sound casual. So I stood at the gate, peering into the street. Snow crunched under Ava's boots as she walked, her red coat bright against the dark. That's when he appeared again. From the same pool of light, the same stillness, he stepped forward, slow and deliberate. He wasn't rushing. He was savoring. My chest tightened. I wanted to scream, but my throat locked. He followed a few paces behind her, then let out a sharp, mocking laugh. The sound was so wrong, so loud in the frozen silence, that I flinched. Ava spun around, eyes wide, then bolted the rest of the way to the neighbor's door. The man stopped and turned his head toward me. Our eyes locked across the snow. He grinned, wide, unnatural, stretching too long, and then he whistled. It wasn't a song I knew. The notes fell uneven, offbeat, almost childlike, like a tune someone made up on the spot. That whistle burrowed into my skull, jittery and wrong. My hands trembled so badly I almost dropped the gate latch. My breath came in sharp bursts, too loud in my ears. Then Dad appeared in the doorway, silhouetted by the warm light behind him. The man's grin faltered. His voice carried low, a growl. "You got lucky this time." And then he turned, strolling casually down the street, still whistling. The police came after Mom called, but he was gone by the time they arrived. They promised to patrol the area. But the second the cruiser rolled away, the night swallowed the street back into silence. That silence didn't last long. By midnight, when Dad took the dog out, the barking started, wild, frantic. The dog pulled against the leash, snarling into the dark. Dad said the man walked past again, close enough that the dog lunged. But the man only smirked, like it was all a game. When Dad demanded to know what he wanted, the man just tapped the mailbox with one gloved finger before walking away, whistling the same broken tune. The next morning, the mailbox was ajar. Inside was nothing, just the faintest smell like damp earth clinging to the envelopes. Christmas morning didn't feel like Christmas. Ava refused to leave her room. Mom kept pacing, checking the blinds, blowing out every candle until the house smelled of smoke instead of cinnamon. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him standing under that streetlight. I heard that whistle. I counted the blinking lights on the tree until the colors blurred together. At dawn, I finally dragged myself to the front door to check the snow. The driveway was clean, smooth except for our own tracks. But when I looked closer, I saw them. Footprints. Heavy boots leading up to our gate. They stopped there, turned back, then circled to the neighbor's house. And that's when I noticed the window. Their daughter's room, on the ground floor. The glass cracked open. A stuffed rabbit lay in the snow beneath it, one ear torn. The scream that tore out of the neighbor's house made my blood run cold. I stumbled back, heart in my throat, as police cruisers swarmed in minutes later. Blue and red lights strobed against the snow, flashing across the bare branches. I stood frozen on the porch as officers ran inside. Neighbors gathered in coats and slippers, whispering, pointing. An officer finally crossed to our house. His face was grim. He crouched to my level, his gloved hand resting on his knee. "You need to know," he said quietly. "He wasn't just passing through. He's been watching. Your name was in his pocket, written on scraps, pulled from your mail." I couldn't breathe. My stomach turned icy, my legs weak. He tried to take the little girl. She's safe, thanks to her mom waking up. But he'd been planning this for weeks. The officer swallowed hard. He's a registered sex offender. and he's been circling your house." He was arrested later that day. They said he'd been hiding in an abandoned shed down the block, watching us for weeks. Relief hit, but it was sharp, bitter, because for all the fear he'd given us, he'd chosen someone else that night. A different child, a different house, and that meant the only reason I wasn't gone was luck. Years have passed, but snow never feels soft anymore. Every time it falls, I hear that whistle carried on the wind, offbeat, broken, circling in the back of my mind. Mom doesn't light cinnamon candles at Christmas. Ava double-checks every lock. Dad still walks the dog, but always carries something heavy in his pocket. And me, I watch the streetlights. I count the snowflakes. I don't trust the silence, because danger doesn't always break down the door. Sometimes it waits just outside the light, smiling, whistling, leaving footprints in the snow until you notice too late. The first thing I remember about Christmas is not the gifts or the tree, but the smell. A smell that clung to the curtains for days afterward. Spiced wine, roasted meat, and something sharper, like smoke mixed with earth. Even now, if I catch that exact blend anywhere, my stomach knots. Because in my house, Christmas wasn't only for the living. We had a ritual. My family called it the Feast for the Forgotten. I grew up in a small Romanian town where superstition was stitched into every season. Old women tied red threads around babies' wrists to keep the ochi ro, the evil eye, away. Nobody celebrated a birthday before the actual date, or it was said death would get impatient. And on Christmas Eve, no dish was cleared from the table. "It is for them," my grandmother would whisper, running her finger over the rim of a glass. "The ones who came before. We eat first, then they eat." At 6, I thought this sounded like pretend. At 12, it sounded like a curse. The table always looked magical. Cabbage rolls steaming in clay pots, golden loaves of kozonak dusted with sugar, and the nut and honey pastries called baklava that crackled when you bit them. My father roasted pork with garlic until the whole street smelled of it. Candles flickered in brass holders, bending shadows across the walls. But when we left everything there, meat bones, crumbs, spilled wine, until morning, the room changed. The table wasn't a place for us anymore. It was theirs. One year, I crept from my bed and pressed my ear to the dining room door. I swear I heard a chair scrape slowly across the floor, as though someone unseen had sat down. My spoon clattered in my hand the next morning, and my father asked why my face was so pale. I lied and told him I'd had a dream. I never admitted that I smelled tobacco smoke in that room, though nobody in my family smoked. The ritual wasn't only ours. My grandmother told us it came from the villages. When I was 13, we visited her sister, Aunt Florica, in the countryside. The house was tiny, the walls plastered white, the stove humming with wood smoke. She served us bread baked with caraway, and after dinner, I asked about the feast. She didn't smile. "A man in our village once cleared his table early," she said, folding her cracked hands. "Said he didn't believe in feeding shadows. That night, he dreamed his father pulled him by the ankles into the river. He drowned the next spring." Her words stuck. For years, I couldn't sit by the river without seeing pale hands drifting beneath the water. When I was 18, my grandfather died. He was tending his garden, pulling weeds by hand, when his heart betrayed him. That December, our house felt hollow. My mother's grief was a quiet, endless tide. She moved through the rooms like a ghost herself, humming under her breath, setting the table with unnecessary precision. The feast that year carried a different weight. The food smelled the same: stuffed cabbage, fried carp, wine spiced with cinnamon, but the air was sharp with absence. I watched the flames bend in the fireplace, their rhythm strange, almost gasping. Shadows didn't just fall across the walls, they stretched long and thin, as though something unseen leaned forward to listen. By midnight, my nerves buzzed like a taut wire. My sister yawned, eager for bed. I tried to follow, but the sight of the table caught me at the corner of my eye. Plates of bones, glasses half full, candles burning low. It didn't look like the aftermath of dinner. It looked like a stage set, waiting for the next act. I lay in bed listening to the storm. Wind rattled the shutters. Snow hissed against the windows. But beneath it, I swore I heard voices. A man's low chuckle, a woman's hum. At last, I couldn't resist. I crept down the hallway, each board bowing and groaning under my feet. Cold slid through the gaps in the wood. My skin prickled as I reached the dining room door. The crack beneath glowed faintly. Shadows moved inside. They weren't random but rhythmic, as though people passed around dishes and reached across plates. I turned the knob. The room was empty. The table sat exactly as we had left it, though the meat looked raw again, red as if freshly cut. The kozionak rose high, sugar glittering in the candlelight. My breath hitched. Then I saw the reflection in the glass doors leading to the garden. Chairs were filled. Men and women I didn't know laughed silently, raising glasses that gleamed. The food in front of them glowed with impossible color. And at the head sat my grandfather, proud as ever, his eyes catching the firelight. He lifted his glass toward me. Then he pointed, at me. I spun around. The chairs were empty, but when I looked back at the glass, he was gone, only to appear behind me. The smell hit first, tobacco smoke, warm and earthy. Then the weight of his presence pressed into the room. Mihai, he said, my childhood nickname. Nobody had called me that in years. My chest caved. We spoke. At least, I think we did. Words slipped out of me that I don't remember forming. He asked about my mother, about my studies. His voice was both in the air and inside my skull. Then his tone shifted, gentle, firm. It's time to go. My stomach lurched. Go where? His eyes glowed with something I couldn't name. I tried to step back, but the room stretched like taffy. Shadows bent around the chairs, and the air thickened until I couldn't breathe. I tasted iron. My ears rang with a high, searing whistle. The glass showed a version of the table where a place had been set for me. Plate gleaming, cup brimming with red wine. I staggered toward it without moving my feet, as though the floor pulled me forward. My grandfather extended his hand, and for a second, I wanted to take it. The warmth of him, the love, the promise of belonging. It hurt to resist. But as his fingers brushed mine, a sharp cold stabbed my palm. Pins and needles raced up my arm. My vision tunneled, and the last thing I saw was his mouth opening wide, wider than any mouth should, swallowing the candlelight whole. I woke in my bed with my family leaning over me. My mother's hand pressed to my forehead, damp with tears. My sister whispered, "He's awake, he's awake." They said they'd found me collapsed in the hallway, but my hand still ached, and when I opened my palm, a single crumb of sugared bread clung there. It wasn't from our meal, it was warm. That morning, when we finally cleared the table, my grandfather's plate was scraped bare. None of us had touched it. My mother insisted she didn't remember setting it for him. I never shook that night. Every Christmas Eve, the house feels wrong. Shadows crawl differently, bending not with the fire, but against it. When the wind rattles the glass, I almost expect to see faces flickering in the reflection. I keep a red thread tied around my wrist, though I laugh it off when friends ask. And sometimes, only sometimes, when the fire burns low and the smell of tobacco drifts where no one should be smoking, I hear his voice again. Mihai, it says, always followed by the same whisper, "It's time to go." Whenever most people think of Christmas, they picture twinkling lights, stockings hung with care, and the comforting jingle of Santa's sleigh. For me, however, Christmas has always been tied to something far more unsettling, a memory that has haunted me since I was 6 years old. As a child, my cousins had an odd tradition of frightening stories. Every Christmas Eve, they would whisper to me in hushed conspiratorial tones that if you saw Santa, his elves would use the ends of their pointy shoes to poke your eyes out. Being a gullible 6-year-old, I believed them completely. Each year, I devised elaborate hiding strategies beneath my blankets, determined to survive the night without losing my eyesight. This plan had always worked, until that particular Christmas Eve. My mom and I followed the usual routine: cookies and milk carefully placed on the counter for Santa, the tree sparkling with lights and ornaments, stockings hung just so. Once the ritual was complete, I climbed into bed, my blanket pulled tightly over my head, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. Outside, snow brushed against the window pane, tapping in soft rhythms that only heightened my anticipation. But that night, sleep didn't come as easily as usual. Somewhere downstairs, I heard a faint scraping sound. Someone, or something, was moving around the kitchen. My stomach knotted. Could it be an elf? Or worse, Santa himself? Curiosity, however, overpowered fear. I had to know what, or who, it was. Creeping down the stairs, I expected to see the familiar sight of a jolly man in a red suit, beard immaculate, happily nibbling on the cookies. Instead, my eyes widened in sheer terror. Standing in the dim kitchen light was a creature unlike anything I had ever seen. Its limbs moved in jerky, unnatural motions as it gorged on everything in the fridge. Its teeth were long and sharp, glistening with a red liquid that looked disturbingly like blood, or maybe ketchup. A foul, metallic scent hung in the air, mixed with the sweet aroma of the cookies. I froze, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. Was this Santa? The creature's head snapped toward me, its eyes locking onto mine. A shiver ran down my spine as it bared its teeth in a smile that stretched far too wide. Then, just as suddenly, it began to roam the house. It inspected the Christmas tree, sniffed at the wrapped presents beneath it, and slowly walked past every decoration I had so carefully placed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But my legs refused to move. Then it stopped, stared at me, and said, in a voice that was both terrible and strangely familiar, "I'll be back." Before I could respond, it turned, climbing effortlessly up the chimney. The only evidence of its visit was the empty fridge and the echo of its footsteps fading into the night. Christmas morning came, and I tried to tell my mom about the creature. Her gentle smile and dismissive laughter assured me that I was just imagining things, a child's overactive imagination running wild. But even as the years passed, the memory never left me. Every holiday, I would find myself glancing nervously at shadows, listening for footsteps that weren't there. 15 years later, that memory returned with a vengeance. I was spending Christmas Eve alone in my apartment, trying to distract myself with a movie to fall asleep. The familiar warmth of blankets and the gentle glow of the screen provided some comfort, but sleep remained elusive. Then came the faint jingle. At first, I thought it was a trick of the movie, or the wind brushing against the window. But the sound repeated. Soft, deliberate, unmistakable. Jingle bells. My heart raced as I realized the noise was coming from inside my home. I pressed my ear against the bedroom door. There was a slow, shuffling rhythm, punctuated by a faint guttural hiss. Shadows flickered across the walls as the lights from the street outside shifted. My pulse thundered, and my hands trembled. I inched backward under my blanket, hiding as I had done as a child, and squinted through a small opening. A movement near the edge of the room caught my eye. A dark shape, tall and thin, slithering with unnatural grace. My breath caught. The creature's teeth glimmered in the dim light, a cruel, elongated grin that made my skin crawl. For a heartbeat, I thought it would attack, but instead, it paused, tilting its head as if listening to me, studying me. Its eyes, strangely familiar, softened for a fleeting moment. "I saved you from them," it whispered, a low, gravelly voice that carried something protective, almost human. Then it was gone, vanishing as silently as it had appeared. The faint smell of metallic blood lingered in the air, mingled with the aroma of Christmas cookies from my freezer. I lay under the blanket for hours, heart pounding, trying to process what had just happened. If that wasn't the creature I had seen as a child, then who or what had been protecting me all these years. Even now, every Christmas Eve, when the wind rattles the windows and the faint echo of distant bells drifts through the night, I find myself hiding under blankets. Not out of fear of elves, not out of fear of Santa, but in case the mysterious visitor decides to return, and sometimes I almost hope it does. December had arrived, and I was newly single after a 2-year relationship ended. Living alone again was strange. At first, the quiet felt like freedom. I could do what I wanted, eat when I wanted, sleep when I wanted. But after a few weeks, the silence began to press in. My townhouse, usually neat and cozy, started to feel hollow. I realized that I missed human presence, the simple noise of someone else moving around, someone laughing at a joke, even the awkward silences that came with company. So, like many in my situation, I returned to dating apps. Tinder, Bumble, the digital parade of faces and fleeting conversations. I wasn't looking for love. I just wanted company, someone to break the monotony of being alone during the holidays. During those weeks, I matched with a few people, but nothing serious came of it. That's when I matched with a woman named Tracy. She gave me her Snapchat and we exchanged casual messages. Most of the time, the conversation fizzled quickly. She would watch my stories, but rarely replied. It was an old pattern from college, but now, in my late 20s, it felt different, unsettling somehow. Then one night, I posted a snap of my apartment with Christmas decorations. To my surprise, Tracy commented, suggesting we do something festive together. I threw out ideas, ice skating, visiting the village lights, but she proposed something simple: decorating my Christmas tree. I hadn't bothered to set up my fake tree, stored in the attic, but she insisted she could help. I agreed, setting a time for 9 p.m. That evening, I tried to make the place feel welcoming. I bought a couple of bottles of wine, tidied up, and fluffed the couch cushions. By 9:30, Tracy messaged me that she was outside. I opened the door and froze. She was taller than I expected, at least 6 feet, and wore strong perfume. There was an odd, faint smell beneath it, like she hadn't showered recently. Her social cues felt off. Small gestures didn't match her words, but I brushed it aside. Nervous, I poured wine, and we made small talk. The tension snapped when she spilled a large drop of red wine on my light blue couch. I rushed to blot it while she apologized. The awkwardness and unfamiliarity made the night feel surreal, but I tried to move past it. We carried the tree down from the attic together, and the decorating began. Christmas music played softly in the background. I poured more wine for both of us, and gradually, the atmosphere relaxed. Or so I thought. While I retrieved bins of ornaments from the crawl space, I felt lightheaded. I hadn't been drinking heavily, and the sensation was unusual, though not extreme. I returned upstairs with the first bin, and she was gone. I called her name, checked the kitchen, the bathroom, even the bedrooms. No one. I assumed she had stepped out, but the quiet made me uneasy. Over the next hour, I noticed subtle changes. A few of my supplements and vitamins were missing from the kitchen counter and bathroom. Small things were out of place. Nothing valuable, but enough to make me uneasy. When I asked her casually if she'd moved anything, she laughed it off, dismissing my concern. Something didn't feel right. By now, a creeping sense of dread had settled over me. The apartment felt smaller, every shadow sharper, every creak of the floorboards amplified. I tried to keep busy, straightening cushions and tidying ornaments, but my thoughts kept returning to the small inconsistencies. Wine bottles slightly out of place, the faint smell lingering, the way she had wandered without explanation. Eventually, I realized she had taken advantage of the wine I'd poured for both of us. Not enough to fully incapacitate me, but enough to dull my attention and coordination slightly. Her movements through my home felt deliberate. She had been searching, not for money, but for prescription medications and supplements. The most unsettling moment came when I caught her standing in the doorway of my living room, silently watching me from across the room. Her posture was still, her gaze unwavering. It wasn't supernatural or instant paralysis, just the unnerving awareness that someone had moved freely through my space, unobserved until that moment. My chest tightened. Every instinct screamed that this was not normal, that this was dangerous. I confronted her calmly, saying I needed her to leave. She smiled faintly, grabbed a few bottles she had collected, and walked out, leaving no further disturbance. She blocked me on Snapchat immediately afterward. By the time I called the police, there was no trace left to follow. Looking back, everything made sense. Her overpowering perfume, the faint body odor, the social awkwardness, they were clues that she was possibly older, unstable, and had serious substance issues. Her charm masked her intentions. She had come into my home under the guise of a holiday activity, using the wine to lower my awareness and rummage through what she wanted. That Christmas, I didn't set up the tree. The violation lingered longer than the physical mess she left behind. It was a stark lesson. Even familiar gestures, shared wine, holiday cheer, can conceal danger. Trust is fragile. People you invite into your home may not leave it in the way you expect. From then on, the holidays became a quiet reminder. Safety isn't about paranoia, it's about awareness. Sometimes, the people who seem friendly enough are exactly the ones who can hurt you, and danger often arrives under the most ordinary pretense. I'll never forget the first night we stepped into that old Litchfield house. The air smelled of aged wood, winter pine, and faint traces of soot from long-dead fireplaces. Every creak of the floorboards sounded louder than it should have, echoing down hallways that stretched farther than I remembered from the blueprints. At first, I thought it was just the excitement of a new home. But there was a strange, lingering feeling, as if the house itself was watching, waiting for us to settle in. We had moved there when I was 7, just days before Christmas. My dad had started a new job nearby, and my parents were eager to get us out of our cramped city apartment. I was thrilled. The house was enormous compared to what we were used to. A wraparound porch blanketed in frost, towering evergreens standing like silent sentinels, creaky wooden floors, and little hidden doors that looked as though they led to secret rooms. Mom dreamed of painting railings and putting flower boxes under the windows. Dad muttered about insulation and drafts, constantly pacing, testing doorknobs, and peering into corners. My siblings, Timmy and Katie, were busy staking claims on closets and exploring every inch of the place. I was just excited for the attic and the backyard I could finally call my own. The first few weeks were a blur of unpacking and decorating, but almost immediately, something felt off. Little things unsettled us. Mom would find her scissors or keys in different places than she remembered. Dad, sitting at the kitchen table one evening, swore he heard soft footsteps overhead, even though we were all downstairs. He laughed it off, saying, "Old houses breathe differently." But I could see the tension in his jaw. I spent hours in the attic, sifting through musty trunks, pretending I was a treasure hunter. That's when I found it. An old, yellowed note wedged between faded Christmas ornaments. It simply said, "Don't forget me at Christmas." I ran to show Mom. She forced a smile, muttering that it was probably a note left by the previous owners, or maybe a decoration she or Dad had misplaced. Even she looked uneasy. At the time, I assumed it was about ornaments. Now, I know it meant something far stranger. Christmas arrived with the usual chaos. Wrapping paper littered the floor. The smell of pine mingled with cookies baking in the oven, and laughter echoed through the tall ceilings. But as morning light crept through the curtains, something caught my eye. The old rocking chair from Grandma's house, tucked in a corner, began to move gently, rocking back and forth. I froze, certain someone was playing a prank, but none of my siblings were near it. It just rocked on its own. Dad touched it lightly, and it stopped immediately. The air felt thick and cold, and a strange humming, soft, almost imperceptible, lingered in the room like a faint perfume of memory. I remember feeling simultaneously terrified and mesmerized. There was no malice, just presence. Something, or someone, was here, noticing us. The next year, things worsened. After opening presents, we found Mom's antique ornaments arranged in a perfect circle on the coffee table. In the center was the same yellowed note, "Don't forget me at Christmas." Katie cried quietly. Dad muttered under his breath. Mom paled and clutched a hand to her chest. We replaced the ornaments on the tree, trying to continue as if nothing had happened. But the unease lingered. By now it was clear this wasn't a normal old house quirk. Something, or someone, was aware of us, especially during the holidays. That night, I woke to a faint tapping sound, like fingernails against wood. I crept downstairs, heart pounding, and saw a shadow move across the living room. It was fleeting, vanishing behind the curtains before I could get a proper look. I told myself it was imagination, but deep down, I knew better. By the third Christmas, the strange events had become ritualized. We would anticipate them, leaving small tokens near the tree. Family photos, treats, trinkets, anything to appease the presents. Some years, nothing happened beyond soft creaks and fleeting feelings of being watched. But that year changed everything. I couldn't sleep and tiptoed downstairs. The house was dark except for the soft glow of the tree lights, which flickered as though a breeze moved through the room, though all windows were closed. That's when I saw it. The rocking chair, moving slowly, almost hypnotically. And there, seated in it, was a faint figure. A woman in outdated clothes, her hair streaked with silver, humming softly. Her eyes, though faint, seemed to pierce the shadows and find me. My heart raced. I ducked behind the wall, barely breathing, until I convinced myself it was a trick of the light. From behind the wall, I noticed subtle details. Her lips moved in silent words I couldn't understand. Her fingers traced the arms of the chair with delicate precision, and a faint scent of pine and waxed floors clung to her. For a heartbeat, she seemed almost human. Then she faded, leaving only the humming echoing in my ears. Over the next few years, we learned her patterns. She never broke anything, never hurt anyone, but she made her presence known each Christmas. We started leaving small offerings, a cookie on the table, a family photo, a tiny trinket. Sometimes it calmed her. Sometimes she ignored them entirely, appearing only in glimpses, a shadow flitting across the stairs, a soft humming behind the kitchen door, the faint smell of winter pine where no tree stood. One year, she lingered longer than usual. I caught a glimpse of her face, and for the first time, I felt sorrow. She was a woman who had lost her family long ago, a soul tied to the joy she never got to see. That realization made her presence almost comforting, though still eerie. Eventually, the events stopped. One Christmas arrived quiet and calm, as if she had finally found what she needed. Or perhaps we had learned to coexist, and she had moved on. The house felt warmer that year, the shadows less dense. I never forgot her. Even now, years later, whenever I see a rocking chair or hear soft humming in an empty house, a chill runs down my spine. I remember that first Christmas and the quiet presence who refused to be ignored, teaching us that sometimes spirits linger not to harm, but to be remembered. I never believed in boogeymen or urban legends, not past my early teens. But some nights have a way of making even the most rational person question reality. That Christmas, I learned the hard way that some stories aren't just tales to scare children. They're warnings. Everything started normally enough. The tree had been up for days, its branches weighed down with a jumbled collection of ornaments, delicate glass balls, faded ribbons, and tiny figures my parents insisted were family heirlooms. The air smelled of cinnamon, sugar, and roasted pine, wrapping the house in the kind of warmth that made you forget the cold outside. My best friend Noah had come over, bringing his usual chaotic energy with him. We exchanged gifts after the hum of family laughter, and clinking dishes had settled into an easy quiet. Noah had a knack for turning even mundane moments into adventures. I always felt a little thrill when he showed up, as if something unexpected might happen, though I never guessed how terrifying that night would become. We'd barely settled into my room when he leaned closer, eyes glinting in the dim candlelight from the hall. "Hey," he whispered. "Have you ever heard of the Nightman?" I laughed, half joking, half curious. "The... what?" "The Nightman," he repeated, lowering his voice. "My uncle told me about him. He comes for kids who misbehave." I snorted, rolling my eyes. "Like an evil Santa?" "Way worse," he said, enjoying the unease he stirred. "He doesn't just leave Cole, he takes you." I tried to convince myself he was exaggerating. Noah was a great storyteller. Too good, maybe. But the way he said it, with that sly, serious energy, made a shiver run down my spine. "So, how does it work? Does he just show up if you're naughty?" I asked, trying to sound brave. "No," Noah said. "You have to summon him. Only if you're stupid or brave enough to try." My curiosity piqued. "Summon him?" "Yes. At midnight," he whispered. "With a candle and a mirror. Say his name 3 times. No more, no less. And watch out." I laughed nervously. "Original. Did your uncle steal that from a horror movie?" He grinned. "Laugh all you want, but that's what he says. And tonight, we're going to find out." I hesitated. This is the dumbest idea ever. "What? Scared?" he teased, his grin widening. I couldn't let him call me a coward. Reluctantly, I got to my feet. "Fine. But if we die, I'm blaming you." The bathroom at the end of the hall was tiny, cold, and rarely used. Its single mirror had edges warped over years, reflecting not just light, but small distortions in reality. Noah placed a candle on the counter. Its flickering flame made the room look alive, shadows stretching and twisting across the cracked tiles and peeling wallpaper. I noticed the faint smell of mildew mixed with the soap scent, like the room had been sealed off from the world. My stomach churned. "All right," Noah whispered. I swallowed hard. "Are we really—" "Just say it," he interrupted. "It's just a story. What's the worst that could happen?" We faced the mirror, reflections pale and uncertain. Together we said, "Nightman, Nightman, Nightman." For a long moment, nothing happened. I chuckled nervously, trying to force humor, but the silence felt wrong. Thicker than air should be, as though the room itself was holding its breath. My reflection seemed to lag behind me slightly, like a delayed echo. Then I saw it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the candlelight. A shadow moved behind our reflections, slow, deliberate, stretching upward. I froze. The shape grew more distinct, tall, impossibly thin, with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce my soul. Its grin stretched too wide for any human face. Its skin was gray, almost translucent, and its tattered clothes hung off its frame like wet cloth. Every movement was careful, like a predator studying its prey. My heart pounded. A low metallic creak echoed somewhere behind the wall. Then a whisper of air brushed against my neck. I dared not breathe too loudly. "Do you see that?" I whispered, barely audible. Noah's hand shook as he pointed. It's real." The figure tilted its head, tilting it unnervingly, as if it could peer inside my thoughts. Then it tapped the inside of the mirror. Tap, tap, tap. Each sound resonated like a warning inside my skull. "Blow out the candle," Noah hissed. I fumbled, trembling, but the flame seemed reluctant, flickering violently before extinguishing. Darkness swallowed the bathroom, leaving only the figure's grin faintly visible, illuminated by some unholy internal light. Then it lunged. The glass shattered with a deafening crash, shards spraying like frozen sparks. Fingers, impossibly long and clawed, snatched Noah's wrist. His scream cut through the darkness, raw and terrified. I grabbed his other arm, pulling with everything I had, but it was stronger. Cold seeped into my bones as the creature tugged him closer. The air smelled of ozone and something metallic, like blood. My mind raced, heart hammering in my throat. Then, abruptly, my mom's voice called from the living room. What's going on in there?" The figure froze. Its head snapped toward the sound, grip loosening for just a heartbeat. I yanked Noah free, stumbling into the hall, the shards crunching under our feet. We mumbled something about rough housing and the broken mirror. Mom didn't press further, but the unease in her eyes mirrored our own. Days later, the bathroom was boarded up, the mirror never replaced. Noah and I drifted apart, the memory of that grin lingering like smoke. Years later, I still hesitate before looking into any mirror at night. Every Christmas, I glance over my shoulder, just in case. Some stories aren't meant for entertainment. Some are warnings. That Christmas, I learned the Nightman isn't a tale. It's waiting, just beyond the reflection. Being deep in addiction during the holidays is surreal. That's the only way I can describe it. The world seems brighter for everyone else, but for someone like me, it feels muted, heavy, and unbearably sharp all at once. The lights glimmer on houses I pass, cheerful music spilling from cafes, laughter echoing on the damp streets, and I feel like an intruder in a world I can no longer touch. My first Christmas as a heavy prescription pill user wasn't entirely miserable, if you can believe it. Back then, I convinced myself it was controlled, just a weekend escape from reality. I carefully measured doses of oxycodone, tapering off with Suboxone whenever I felt myself slipping too far. I liked to think I had control, that I could handle it, but control is a lie addicts tell themselves. Over time, small doses became bigger, and bigger doses became constant. Hobbies, friends, work, family, all fell by the wayside. The only thing that mattered was avoiding withdrawal. I kept a functioning life for nearly a year. Jobs, relationships, some semblance of normalcy. Then, after a brutal breakup with the one person who had kept me grounded, I surrendered fully. I told myself it was temporary, just a detour, a test of strength. 6 years disappeared in a haze of missed holidays, broken promises, and quiet desperation. By the time I moved to Seattle, far from my parents and any stability, Christmas became brutal. Winters there are dark, damp, and isolating. The gray light of morning merges with drizzle and fog until the city feels like one endless shadow. Pills that worked in the summer barely touch the craving now. Everyone else spent the holidays with family, meals, and tradition. For addicts, it was a race to stockpile before the snow, and celebrations closed every door. By December 23rd, my roommate and I had scraped together just enough oxycodone to survive the holiday, a fragile thread of security. That afternoon, I felt relief, a fleeting warmth, a false sense of peace. I went to work. She went to hers. When I returned to the apartment, anticipation buzzed in my chest. I opened our small wooden stash box, and my heart sank. Every pill, gone. Denial flared. Maybe she hid them somewhere else. Maybe she only took a few and would return the rest. But the truth hit fast. She wasn't my partner anymore. She had taken everything and disappeared. Panic surged. But addiction breeds pragmatism. There was no time to scream or cry. I walked for miles through the slick, rainy streets, each step leaving a puddle reflection warped and trembling. Phone calls rang unanswered. Familiar corners of the city, the gas station, the dingy alley, the late-night pharmacy, yielded nothing. My body shook, a tremor fueled by both cold and withdrawal. Hours crawled by like lead. By nightfall, I had just enough to last the night, a thin, fragile line keeping withdrawal from consuming me entirely. By Christmas morning, withdrawal hit in full force. My body felt like it was betraying me. Muscles aching, stomach twisting, head pounding. Every thought was consumed by survival. Faces blurred in the gray morning light. Paranoia and desperation pressed on me like a physical weight, every shadow threatening judgment or violence. The usual holiday cheer was replaced by a relentless, grinding fear. Then came Victor, a man I had long avoided. His smile was casual, too easy, as if he knew more than he should. He promised relief and introduced me to Marcus. Marcus's house was a 3-story brick building tucked at the end of a quiet street, the kind of place that looked normal, even inviting, but hides secrets in plain sight. Outside, icicles hung like knives from the eaves. Inside, the warmth was almost suffocating, too perfect, the scent of pine and baking cookies masking something darker. Marcus handed me a small baggie of pills without hesitation. Relief washed over me immediately, the physical pain dulling just enough to breathe. Then Marcus led me upstairs. That's when I saw him. A young man, no older than 17, lay on a bed, pale, barely moving, with dried vomit crusted around his mouth. My stomach lurched violently. The air was thick and sickly, a mix of bleach, fear, and decay. My mind screamed, but my legs refused to move. Marcus didn't flinch. "He's 18, he said casually, as though stating the weather. I froze, horror rooting me to the spot. Questions hammered inside my head. How did this happen? Why him? What was I supposed to do? Marcus's calmness was terrifying, unnerving. "I need him gone," he said simply, his tone businesslike, like disposing of trash. I couldn't process. My hands shook as I helped move the body, wiped down the sheets, cleaned the vomit. I told myself it wasn't murder, not really. But the images, the boy's pale face, the smell, the helplessness, haunt me every Christmas. Every detail is carved into memory. The shallow rise and fall of his chest, the slick sensation of the floor under my knees, the muffled hum of the heater. The horror wasn't in the blood or violence. It was in the moral decay, the way normalcy hid cruelty. I didn't quit then. Not truly. Another year of destruction, chaos, and self-loathing passed before I clawed my way back towards stability. But the memories remain vivid, unrelenting. I wake on some mornings convinced I can smell that apartment again. See that boy's eyes. Feel the weight of my silence. The lesson is simple. Nothing is worth betraying your conscience. Every choice carries consequences, and crossing moral lines doesn't just hurt others. It haunts you relentlessly. Even now, every Christmas, the memories come back. The boy's pale face, the helplessness, the smell and the silence of that apartment. They are with me still. A reminder that some holidays are stolen not by circumstance, but by our own decisions and the choices we let others drag us into. The traumatizing events I'm about to share happened several years ago. At the time, I was a mother to a spirited 4-year-old daughter named Juniper. She was my entire world, my heartbeat, my reason for getting through each day. That fateful day started as a normal pre-Christmas outing. My husband was at work, so I decided to take Juniper to the mall for some last-minute holiday shopping. As soon as we stepped into the atrium, Juniper's eyes lit up. There, seated in the middle, was Santa Claus. She jumped up and down in excitement, and I assumed she associated him with presents. The line to see him was long, but I wanted to make this experience special. When it was finally our turn, I felt a creeping sense of unease. Something about this Santa's stare unsettled me. His eyes were wide and unblinking, almost glassy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he had been on something. Juniper climbed onto his lap, chattering about the gifts she wanted for Christmas, and I watched, my stomach twisting with anxiety. After a couple of minutes, he got her down, gave her a wink, and said a cheerful, "Merry Christmas." Relief washed over me as we moved on with our shopping, but the feeling of unease never left. Later, as I browsed through a clothing store, I glanced up and thought I saw the mall Santa standing outside the store. My mother's instincts flared. I grabbed Juniper and exited through a different door. We continued shopping, but I couldn't shake the sensation that we were being watched. By lunchtime, we decided to grab a bite in the food court. Even while eating, I couldn't relax. My gut screamed at me that something wasn't right. Then, suddenly, the mall Santa appeared again. He walked right up to our table, smiling in his jolly, Santa-like voice. "Hey there, Juniper. Remember to be good. so Santa can bring you lots of presents." Juniper's eyes sparkled with excitement, and people nearby smiled at the festive scene. But I froze, heart pounding. I didn't want to traumatize my daughter by acting out of panic, so I calmly grabbed her hand and told her it was time to leave. She waved goodbye, and we hurried out. That night, I recounted everything to my husband. He was furious at the audacity of the man, but agreed I had handled it the right way. The next morning, I woke up to find a strange blue car parked outside our house. I didn't think much of it at first. It could have been anyone. But there was something off about the way it lingered there. By 11 a.m., it was still in the same spot. My unease grew. I decided to check it out and walked to the mailbox. The car was empty, except for a Santa hat resting on the passenger seat. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a coincidence. I ran inside to call my husband. He thought I was imagining things, but agreed to come home immediately. A few minutes later, my worst fear was realized. The man, the mall Santa, was sitting in the car, photographing our house. As soon as he noticed me looking, he sped off so quickly that I couldn't even get a license plate number. Minutes later, my husband arrived, and together we contacted the authorities. There wasn't much they could do, but we made sure the situation was documented. The next day, my husband stayed home to watch over Juniper and me. Around noon, we discovered footprints outside her bedroom window, footprints that neither of us had left. That night, sleep was impossible. The three of us decided to camp out in the living room, so Juniper wouldn't be alone if anything happened. Shortly after midnight, the blue car returned. The mall Santa approached our home carrying a large bag. He began tapping on Juniper's window, whispering, "Hey Juniper, it's Santa. Come take a ride in my sleigh and I'll show you the reindeer." I called the police while my husband kept watch through the window, hidden in the shadows. My hands trembled, heart pounding, unsure if this man had a weapon. Each tap on the glass felt like a countdown to disaster. Finally, the police arrived. My husband, seeing the officers, lunged at the man and tackled him to the ground. The officers detained him. He had no weapons on him, but his car contained duct tape and rope. The thought of what could have happened still gives me nightmares. In the end, our family was safe. Juniper never knew the full terror we had endured, and my husband and I were left with a memory that haunts every Christmas Eve. If you are a parent, trust your instincts. If something feels off, act on it. That gut feeling could save your child and your family from a nightmare you can never forget. My Christmas miracle wasn't gifts or decorations. It was surviving a real-life horror story while keeping my daughter safe, and remembering that some instincts are not to be ignored. It was the night before Christmas, and finally, the house had surrendered to a brittle, fragile quiet. The tree in the corner twinkled, each bulb reflecting in the polished wood like tiny watchful eyes. Pine mingled with cocoa on the counter, creating a warmth that did little to chase away the chill creeping through the walls. Outside, snow fell steadily, each flake floating lazily against the dim glow of the porch light, muffling the world into an almost unreal silence. After tucking Lily into bed, I lingered at her door, hearing her soft breathing, her tiny chest rising and falling in peaceful slumber. For a moment, I allowed myself a quiet smile, the comfort of home settling briefly in my chest. Then I descended, seeking a movie and a blanket, eager for calm, for distraction. By 11 o'clock, I was nestled into the sofa, the fire's warmth brushing my legs, when I heard it. A sharp, deliberate tap at the window. My muscles froze. Tap. Pause. Tap. Exactly 3 times. Not random, not playful. Something deliberate, something measured. My throat tightened. I peered into the darkness. Snow clung to the glass, glittering under the dim light. And yet, nothing. Just the faint outlines of the garden, the swing set half buried in snow. I muttered, probably a kid fooling around, and pulled the blinds closed. My rational mind fought against the tickle of unease crawling up my spine. Then it came again, louder, more insistent, echoing. Every instinct screamed at me. I approached cautiously, the floorboards creaking under my weight like whispers of warning. I cracked the window just enough to hear the voice that would haunt me for years. "Please, "Let me in," it said, trembling, almost childlike. But beneath it, a weight lingered, a quiet menace that made my stomach twist. I pressed closer, straining. A figure loomed, tall, thin, shadows obscuring every detail. Its eyes reflected nothing, or perhaps too much. I couldn't tell. The voice came again. I'm cold. Just for a moment. I won't hurt anyone. I promise. Just a little warmth." My fingers gripped the sill, heart hammering. "Go away. I'll call the police." The figure hesitated, muttering. Then it crouched, almost like a human silhouette stretching unnaturally. One long, thin hand pressed against the glass, leaving streaks in the frost. I couldn't see a face clearly, only a vague impression. Pale, angular, too elongated. A smell hit me. Damp earth, cold metal, something faintly metallic like rusted blood. Suddenly, footsteps crunched across the snow. The figure bolted. Relief should have followed. Instead, a cold dread wrapped around me. I sank into the sofa, trying to force calm, but then I heard it. Soft, deliberate footsteps inside the living room. My chest constricted. "Daddy?" Lily's voice was small, trembling. I bolted toward her room. "Sweetheart? What's wrong?" "Santa," she whispered. "He's at my window. He says I can let him in and see my presents." My blood ran cold. The snow outside her window was untouched. Not a single footprint, not a single shadow. Yet the voice, soft and coaxing, had existed. Someone, somewhere, had whispered it to her. I held her tightly, scanning every corner of the room, my mind racing. Something about the voice, the figure. It didn't belong. It shouldn't exist. Hours passed, each creak, each gust of wind, a heartbeat of terror. I imagined him, what he could do, how close he had been. When I finally dared to check the windows, a single long scratch marred the frost on the sill of Lily's window. Just enough to look deliberate, a warning or a message I couldn't read. My stomach turned. Even after dawn broke, the fear lingered. And when the day's chores dragged me outside, I noticed footprints in the fresh snow leading from the driveway into the woods. No intruder in sight, but the prints stopped abruptly, as if something had vanished. Years later, I still feel the cold that seeped beneath our doors. I still hear the soft whisper that came through the glass. And I still wonder, not if he might return, but whether he ever truly left at all. It was a Christmas Eve that began like any other, wrapped in the familiar glow of twinkling lights and the comforting aroma of pine needles from the freshly decorated tree. I was 16, perched on the edge of a worn armchair in the living room, flipping through an old magazine I'd lost interest in minutes ago. The fireplace crackled softly, casting warm, dancing shadows across the walls. My parents were upstairs preparing for bed, and my little brother Timmy lay in his bedroom, already deep in dreams of sugar plums and Santa's sleigh. I hadn't believed in Santa for years, yet I smiled at the thought of maintaining the illusion for Timmy. The comfort of tradition made the cold winter outside feel distant, like a world I didn't belong to tonight. Yet, something subtle in the air made the warmth feel fragile, like a thin veneer stretched over an underlying tension. At first I shrugged it off as my imagination, but as midnight approached, the unease grew. The house seemed different, heavier, thicker, almost breathing. Then I heard it, a soft, deliberate tap, tap, tap against the back window. My pulse quickened, and I froze mid-breath. Probably the wind, I told myself. But the taps continued in a slow, measured rhythm, almost like someone testing their steps against the snow outside. A thud followed, solid and echoing. My stomach tightened. Slowly, I crept toward the sound, my bare feet silent against the rug. Muffled voices drifted from the living room, low and strained, whispering in tones that weren't quite human. I swallowed, reaching for the bat tucked behind the armchair, and paused. Bells rang faintly, sharp, deliberate, and malicious. My heart hammered as I peered into the living room. He was there, a man in a tattered Santa suit, but all the warmth of holiday cheer had fled from him. His beard was matted, streaked with gray and grime. His eyes were deep wells of something I couldn't name, curdled malice, patience, and a cruelty older than I could imagine. His movements were unnervingly slow, deliberate, almost like he was testing gravity with each shuffle. On the floor near the fireplace, a small figure sat unmoving. A girl, no older than Timmy, her clothing torn and stained, her skin ghostly pale. She stared at the flames, expressionless, her eyes hollow, unblinking. My throat tightened as I realized she wasn't even aware of Santa's presence. Or perhaps she was aware, and it didn't matter. I wanted to run, but fear cemented my legs. Every instinct screamed escape, yet I was trapped by curiosity and horror. The man in the Santa suit knelt beside her, whispering guttural words I couldn't comprehend. The girl didn't flinch, didn't move, just remained motionless, as if his words carved lines into her being that I could not understand. Then he turned. His gaze met mine, and the room went cold. Not physically, cold in a way that clawed at the marrow of my bones, gnawed at my certainty of reality. There was intelligence there, yes, but also something vast and alien, something that did not belong to the realm of human understanding. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, the floorboards creaking under his weight. My fingers tightened around the bat. I blinked, and my mother appeared in the doorway. Her eyes were wide, her lips parted as if she wanted to speak but couldn't. In that frozen moment, the room's tension warped. The jingling of bells cut sharper now, almost a scream inside my skull. And then, as suddenly as he appeared, the man in the Santa suit stepped back into the shadows, swallowed by darkness, leaving nothing behind. My mother blinked. She smiled faintly, a soft, tired, motherly smile, and told me to return to bed. Sleep was impossible. I lay in my room, staring at the ceiling, listening to every creak and groan of the house. My mind raced with questions I didn't dare voice. Had I imagined it? Or had something real, something impossibly wrong, walked through our home that night? Morning came, bright and cheerful. The trees sparkled in the sunlight. Timmy chattered about presents, and my parents moved as if nothing had occurred. But I knew. Something had changed. The safe, comforting warmth of Christmas had been infiltrated, violated. Years later, I still feel it. The brush of icy dread when the clock nears midnight on Christmas Eve. And every year, I wonder if he is still out there, waiting, watching, patient. Because some traditions are better left undisturbed. Christmas was supposed to be bright, warm, and joyful. But that night it became the darkest night of my childhood. I was still small, defenseless, and painfully aware that I couldn't run fast enough, couldn't fight, and couldn't call for help. That night, I came face to face with pure evil, and survived only through instinct, luck, and terror. Back then, I didn't love Christmas. I liked presents, candy, and the occasional surprise from Santa, but our family gatherings were endless exercises in boredom. My parents, young and restless, whispered about work stress or politics. My siblings fussed over toys they already had, and the adults spent hours comparing salaries or complaining about travel. I often felt invisible, a shadow amid the laughter and chatter. That night, after the adults had settled into the dining room with wine and small talk, I slipped away to the corner of the room where my toys were scattered, hoping for distraction. I remember staring at my little action figures, trying to imagine adventures in some faraway galaxy. That's when I noticed it. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Perhaps the countless late-night horror movies had warped my imagination. But the shadow moved again, deliberate, on the frosted window behind me. I froze, my stomach knotting. Curiosity outweighed fear, and I stepped closer. Outside, standing in the snow, was a man in a mask so grotesque it seemed carved from nightmares. The mouth stretched wide, jagged and unnatural. The eyes were hollow, yet uncomfortably aware of me. He tapped the window slowly, deliberately, then pointed toward the front door. A shiver ran through me. My first instinct screamed to run, but my legs refused. My mind whirled. What do I do? Do I hide? Call for someone? Every thought was immediately drowned by a wave of panic. I barely breathed. Then came the knock at the front door, sharp, deliberate. That must be Uncle Henry with the beer, my dad said, laughing. "Don't open it. It's not Uncle Henry." My voice trembled, barely audible. "You're imagining things, Josh," he said dismissively. I knew I wasn't. My fear had roots. Something malevolent was out there. I retreated to my room, locking the door and wedging a chair beneath the handle. My hands shook uncontrollably. Every creak of the floor sounded like footsteps. Shadows from the Christmas lights twisted unnaturally across the walls. I could hear faint fireworks outside, their distant booms cutting through the cold night air. My chest heaved. The house, so bright and cheerful just minutes before, had turned oppressive and dangerous. Then the pounding began, sharp, violent, urgent, against my bedroom door. My heart stopped. "Kid, could you open the door for me? Please, I just want to talk." A voice hissed through the cracks. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the chair leg as if it could protect me. "It's him, the guy with the mask!" I screamed. The voice grew colder, deliberate, recounting things I will never forget. Children he had killed, his methods, and what he intended for me. I could hear the wood bending under his grip. The terror wasn't just in the pounding, it was in the precision, the way he had waited, planned, and watched. Every detail was meant to terrorize. Minutes stretched like hours. My parents were outside, distracted by fireworks, oblivious to the danger just feet away. The intruder whispered details that chilled me to the bone. Moments he had followed me at school, friends' houses, even the swimming pool. How long he had waited for the perfect moment to strike when I was alone. The meticulousness of his planning, the patience behind his evil. It was almost worse than the threat itself. I pressed my back against the wall, trying to think, trying to breathe quietly. My mind raced through every story, every horror film I'd ever seen, imagining the ways he could get in. Each shadow became a threat. Every floorboard creak, every wind gust, sounded like him moving closer. I tried to imagine him as human, rational, fallible. But the mask, the voice, the cold precision, no human could feel that absence of empathy. I considered breaking a window myself, but I froze at the thought. The cold snow, the risk of cutting myself, the possibility he was waiting just outside. It was paralyzing. My heart felt like it would explode. Then faintly, I heard it, the soft scrape of shoes against the floor upstairs. My father. Silhouetted in the doorway, he gripped a heavy lampstand, moving slowly, scanning the room. He crouched, keeping low, cautious, aware that sudden movement could provoke disaster. He didn't rush in. He calculated. The intruder, perhaps sensing my father's presence, loosened his grip. I heard the pressure lift from the door. My father smashed the window carefully, low, keeping his eyes sharp. I scrambled out onto the lawn, teeth chattering, snow soaking through my pajamas. The masked figure disappeared into the night, vanishing as suddenly as he had appeared. Even after he was gone, the terror lingered. The whispers, the pounding, the sense of being hunted. They haunted every corner of the house. Weeks passed in a haze of fear. I didn't leave the house without someone nearby. Police patrols became routine. Ordinary shadows became sinister. The night felt alive with threats I couldn't see. Then, one cold February evening, officers came with news. He had been caught. He called himself the Grinch, confessed to multiple child disappearances, and revealed bodies buried in his yard. His motive was simple: terror for infamy. Christmas would never feel the same again. Years later, I still see a psychiatrist. Every knock, every creak, every stranger's shadow triggers that memory. That Christmas taught me that evil can come when least expected, hiding in normalcy, waiting for the perfect moment. Survival depends entirely on instinct, courage, and sometimes a single locked door. Even now, when holiday lights glow on houses, I feel a cold knot in my stomach. Behind every laughter, every warm glow, there is the possibility of darkness. That night is never gone. It lives in every shadow, every creak, every step behind me. You think you know Christmas. You think you understand joy, laughter, and the harmless magic of Santa Claus. But sometimes, the things we associate with cheer hide a darkness you can't imagine, until it's staring at you in a hotel hallway, grinning in the wrong way. It happened during a Christmas trip to Universal Studios, a memory that refuses to fade. The trip was supposed to be perfect. I was 12, just old enough to appreciate the spectacle, and my friend Max and I were buzzing with anticipation. Universal had recently opened their replica of Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, glittering with candy-colored lights and snow-dusted rooftops. Even though our families stayed at a modest hotel nearby, far from the on-site resorts, the park promised enough magic to make the extra travel worth it. That morning, the streets of the park were a winter wonderland, though the snow was artificial. I could see Max's eyes widen as flakes swirled around our boots. The chocolate factory exhibit was more incredible than we had imagined. Rivers of syrupy chocolate, walls lined with candy, and Oompa Loompas that seemed almost alive. Every corner offered treats we couldn't resist, and we spent hours sampling everything in sight. By evening, the park's bright lights were reflected in our tired, sugar-saturated faces. Our parents, indulgent and slightly tipsy from holiday cocktails, had collapsed in the hotel rooms, leaving Max and me with too much energy to sleep. I remember lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, feeling the residual thrill of the day still pulsing through me. Max texted suddenly, "Yo, I saw a gym on the way up. You want to race on the treadmills?" I groaned, muscles aching from hours of walking, but curiosity won over. Sure. How do we get in?" "No worries. I'll use my room key. Just meet me on my floor," came his reply. The plan seemed simple. Sneak down, ride the elevator up, and avoid waking our parents. But simplicity is a fragile illusion when fear is waiting around the corner. I fumbled in the dark, fingers shaking as I dug through my mother's purse for the room key. Each creak of the floorboard sounded amplified in the silence. My heartbeat thumped in rhythm with every step. The hallway stretched ahead, illuminated only by dim emergency lights, shadows pooling like ink along the edges. Then I saw him. Half-dressed, unkempt, and unmistakably wrong. A man stood near the end of the hallway. Boots, a tattered Santa hat, a fake beard askew, and briefs that had clearly seen better days. His eyes locked on me, wide, unnerving, gleaming with something I couldn't name. He wasn't jolly. He wasn't festive. He was watching. I froze, unsure whether to run or stay. Every instinct screamed danger, but my mind tried to rationalize. Maybe a drunk cosplayer? A hotel employee on break? But deep down, I knew that this was no ordinary sight. I pressed the elevator button repeatedly, like some magic could summon safety faster. The man followed, shuffling with an unsettling persistence. His voice, croaky and sing-song, cut through the hallway. "Well, aren't you going in? You can go first, no problem, my little angel." He entered the elevator and began humming a warped, off-key version of a holiday song. From a limp sack, he thrust a candy cane toward me. I froze, but took it. Red lint clung to it like dust. My stomach twisted. I hurried to Max's floor, every shadow magnified, every sound a threat. And that's when the real terror began. I opened the door. Max was convulsing on the carpet, his body jerking unnaturally, eyes rolling back. Panic hit me in waves. I yelled, banging on doors, calling for help. My hands shook as I tried to steady him, but his movements were beyond what I could control. Something clicked in my memory, the candy cane. My eyes darted to the one I had taken from the strange Santa. Slowly, dread settled over me. He must have poisoned them. That simple, innocent-seeming gesture carried something deadly. Hotel staff arrived minutes later, but those minutes felt like hours. Max's strength waned, and my hope with it. By the time paramedics reached him, it was too late. The investigation revealed the horror. Security footage showed the man moving through hallways, distributing candy canes to unsuspecting guests. Delusional, methodical, frighteningly ordinary in appearance. He was exactly the kind of monster you'd never suspect. I testified during the trial, watched footage over and over. The juxtaposition of his Santa persona with the calculated evil he executed made my skin crawl. Christmas cheer, bright lights, candy, laughter was a mask for something incomprehensibly dark. Even now, I can remember the smells of the chocolate factory, the fake snow, and the terrifying juxtaposition of joy and malevolence. Some holidays leave warmth, others leave shadows, and some leave a permanent reminder. Evil can show up wearing a familiar face, smiling as it waits for the perfect moment to strike. It was the first Christmas I'd be spending completely alone. On paper, it probably sounded sadder than it actually was. I didn't have the money to fly home, and taking extra vacation days wasn't feasible. But honestly, I liked my own company. There was something comforting in walking through quiet neighborhoods, gazing at the carefully arranged lights, while the rest of the world celebrated with loud parties, crowded shopping malls, and frantic travel. I had always found peace in solitude. And that year, I was determined to make the holiday quiet, comforting, and mine. The morning began predictably. I pulled on a slightly faded Christmas sweater, the one with a tacky reindeer stitched across the chest, and brewed a strong cup of coffee. Steam curled from the mug, filling the kitchen with the familiar, bitter aroma. I left the classic cartoon version of How the Grinch Stole Christmas playing in the background, its cheerful nonsense a gentle counterpoint to the heavy quiet of the apartment. Breakfast was simple: eggs, toast, a few slices of fruit. I sank into my chair, cradling the mug in my hands, savoring the warmth as I scrolled through family group texts and video called my parents. Their voices carried the chaos and laughter of holiday morning, and for a moment, I felt connected despite the distance. By mid-morning, I decided to check the mail. The crisp winter air bit at my cheeks as I stepped outside, and the neighborhood was unusually quiet. Snow crunched under my boots as I trudged up the path, my breath leaving tiny clouds in the frigid air. That's when I noticed them. Footprints in the snow on my porch. They weren't fresh. The top layer of powder was frozen solid, clearly laid hours earlier, probably overnight when temperatures had plunged. A shiver ran down my spine, but I told myself it was nothing. A neighbor who had forgotten a package, maybe, or a delivery that had gone astray. Still, I couldn't shake the unease crawling up my arms and into my chest. I shook my head, muttering under my breath, "It's Christmas. Relax." I forced a small laugh and carried the mail inside, trying to drown the feeling with the hum of the Grinch's nonsensical songs. Hours passed in the warmth of my apartment. I opened gifts from my family, read letters, and watched the predictable saccharine plots of Hallmark movies. Yet an undercurrent of restlessness lingered, gnawing at the edges of my calm. By mid-afternoon, I felt the familiar itch for movement. I bundled up, pulling my scarf tight around my neck, slipping on mittens, and tugging my coat closed. The neighborhood walk had always been my escape, a way to immerse myself in the small joys of winter. The smell of pine from the decorated lawns, the crisp tang of snow in the air, the twinkle of lights reflecting on icy surfaces. It was peaceful at first. The usual neighbors waved from behind windows, the occasional dog barked from fenced yards, and the world felt gently suspended in the cozy lull of Christmas afternoon. But then I noticed him. At first glance, he looked like anyone else taking a walk. A man in a baseball cap and dark coat, hands tucked into his pockets. I didn't think much of it until I saw him again, moments later, on a parallel street. My stomach sank when I realized he was moving in my direction, keeping pace from across the street. A slow, creeping dread started to bloom inside me, tightening around my ribs. I quickened my pace, deliberately taking a side street, hoping to lose him in the maze of snow-dusted sidewalks and lampposts. But when I glanced behind me, he was there. Not just nearby. He was following, deliberate and precise. The air seemed heavier, colder, as though the snow and wind had thickened around him. Every crunch of his boots echoed like a drumbeat in my chest. Fear made my thoughts jumbled, rapid. Call the police? Run? Yell? My fingers tingled as adrenaline surged. My heart hammered so hard I feared it would betray me, giving away my location. Every instinct screamed at me. Go home. Fast. I did. I practically flew down the street, my boots leaving messy prints in the freshly fallen snow. The apartment door never looked so far away. When I finally stepped inside, kicking off my wet boots and fumbling with the lock, relief washed over me briefly. The apartment was warm, smelled faintly of pine and coffee, and the soft hum of the Grinch cartoon clung to the air. Then came the knock. It was soft at first, almost tentative. My stomach dropped. I froze, listening. Knock. Again. My pulse spiked. Something about the timing, the exact pause between knocks, made my skin crawl. I crept toward the peephole, hand trembling slightly. The man was there, too close. Baseball cap shadowed his face, but something inside me recognized him. Not immediately, but instinctively. Familiarity curled around my fear like a knife twisting in my chest. "Who are you?" I asked, voice steadier than I felt. No response, just silence, then another, harder knock. My fingers pressed against the door frame. Keep calm, don't panic. But my thoughts spiraled. What if he has a weapon? What if... The third knock was violent, full force, and the door rattled under his push. My breath caught. My palms burned from pressing against the wood, but he didn't relent. Every second stretched, each creak of the frame screaming louder than the last. My body trembled uncontrollably, adrenaline mingling with icy fear. I could hear the faint crunch of snow outside, the muffled sound of wind, and beneath it all, a low, almost imperceptible rasp of his breathing. Then, just as suddenly as it began, silence. I exhaled shakily, barely daring to move. The sirens came next, wailing and piercing the stillness. Red and blue lights reflected across the snow. I opened the door slightly, letting uniformed officers surge past me to confront the man. It turned out that a neighbor, noticing the man's suspicious behavior, had called police earlier. The ex, someone I hadn't spoken to in over 6 years, was found attempting to break in. His car, parked nearby, contained knives, a firearm, and a roll of duct tape. He didn't speak, didn't explain, just sat with a blank, chilling stare. The twist that made my blood run cold came later. Among his belongings was a stack of photos. Photos of my apartment, my street, and myself, taken at different times over the past months. He hadn't just followed me this Christmas. He had been watching, cataloging, studying my routine. The thought made me shiver uncontrollably. My safe, solitary world suddenly pierced with the sharp edge of violation. I spent the rest of the holiday in a daze. The warmth of Christmas had turned brittle and sharp. Even now, years later, I double-check locks, peek out windows, and flinch at the sound of footsteps behind me. The lessons of that Christmas are etched deep. Danger can lurk in the most familiar faces, and even the quietest moments of life are not always as safe as they seem. I was 16 when it happened, and it was Christmas Eve. Snow fell relentlessly outside, thick and muffling, turning the world into a silent white expanse. The kind of snow that absorbs sound, creating an almost otherworldly stillness, where even the wind seems cautious. Inside, the house felt warm and familiar. The glow of the Christmas tree lights painted the room in soft golds and reds, flickering across the ornaments like tiny, silent fireworks. My parents and I sat cross-legged in the living room, eggnog in hand, surrounded by the clutter of wrapping paper and small gifts. Everything smelled like cinnamon, pine, and freshly baked cookies. Everything felt perfect, predictable, safe. Then came the sound. At first, I thought it was a trick of the wind, maybe the branches scraping against the roof. But no, the knocking was sharp, deliberate, echoing 3 distinct thuds through the quiet house. My heart stuttered. My parents froze mid-laugh, exchanging a glance I couldn't read. The laughter inside me, that warm, safe laughter, died instantly. Snow was falling too heavily for anyone to be out. No neighbor would dare venture through this blizzard. And yet, The sound was unmistakable. "Probably some pranksters," Dad muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. I pressed my face against the cold glass of the window, watching the yard. Snowflakes swirled in frantic patterns, drifting lazily onto the untouched ground. Not a single figure, no shadows, nothing but white. My pulse quickened, and I had to bite my lip to stop it from trembling. Dad walked to the door, each step sounding louder than the last. He opened it, peering out with a cautious curiosity. My mind raced through every logical explanation: neighbors, stray packages, lost mail, then froze when I saw what lay across the threshold. A black cat, soaked in blood. Its fur was matted, streaked crimson against the white snow, and it twitched weakly, eyes half-lidded but aware. My stomach turned. My first instinct was revulsion, but another wave of protectiveness followed immediately. We've always been a family of animal lovers, and I couldn't stand the thought of ignoring a living creature in need. The strangest thing, something that made my pulse hammer against my ribs, was that there were no footprints, no tire tracks. Nothing in the fresh snow suggested anyone had carried him here. It was as if the storm itself had delivered the cat. "Did someone leave him?" Mom asked softly, her voice taut with uncertainty. "No," I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. "There's no one out there." We brought him inside, wrapping him gently in towels and offering warm water. He shivered violently, claws lightly scratching as if resisting, but not with aggression, more as if afraid of his own body. My parents fussed over him, checking for broken limbs or signs of infection, murmuring reassurances I couldn't believe were true. He was alive somehow, but barely. Over the next few days, we took him to the vet. He was a young male, unneutered, covered in claw marks and bruises. The vet shook his head. "This little guy's been through hell," he said. "Lucky to be alive." We named him Shadow because he was always just at the edge of vision, quiet and inscrutable. But our house was already full. After a week of watching him slowly recover, we decided to give him to a friend down the street. They were thrilled, and Shadow, wary but alive, seemed to adapt quickly to their care. Life resumed its usual rhythm. Snow melted, Christmas came and went, and I tried to forget that night. But the image of Shadow, bloodied and alone, has haunted me ever since. Something about the way he looked, like he had come from somewhere I could never reach, some place that existed beyond logic, made my skin crawl every time I recalled it. Then, 4 or 5 months later, Shadow, now renamed Clark by his new family, became the hero I never expected. It started with frantic, ear-splitting howls in the middle of the night. Not ordinary meows, but long, desperate cries that made the hairs on my friends' necks stand on end. They ran to his room and found Clark standing rigid, tail puffed like a bottle brush, eyes fixed on the garage, fur bristling. Smoke was curling from the garage door, thin and almost invisible in the dark, but unmistakable. Clark continued yowling, pawing at the door, refusing to leave their side. Thanks to his persistence, my friends evacuated, moments before the fire would have consumed not only the garage, but the cars and flammable chemicals stored inside. If not for Clark, it could have been a disaster. From that night on, Clark wasn't just a cat, he was a guardian. He patrolled the yard, often staring into the dark spaces of the night, as if watching for something unseen. My friends joked that he was Superman incarnate, and the name stuck. But for me, the memory of that first Christmas Eve lingered like a shadow. I often revisit it in my mind. Why had the cat come to us? Was it instinct, coincidence, or something more? The fact that he appeared with no footprints, in the middle of a blizzard, felt like a warning. A silent nudge from the universe. Every Christmas Eve, when snow falls thick and quiet, I glance out the window. My heart tightens, half expecting to see a black shape in the snow, waiting silently, watching. And sometimes, just sometimes, I think I do. Some creatures, small, overlooked, underestimated, carry more weight than we could ever imagine. And on that Christmas Eve, one fragile, beaten little black cat carried the weight of a warning, a heroism, and a mystery I'll never forget. Christmas mornings have a way of folding time in on itself. 1 second you're blinking into light, the next you're 5 again, pinched between the smell of cinnamon and the ridiculous glitter of tinsel. That's how it started for us. A quiet, small Christmas. Just me, my parents, and my little sister Claire. Grandma had stayed home this year. My cousins were otherwise engaged. We'd decided on cinnamon rolls, stockings, and an afternoon of board games. Simple, warm, safe. I remember the exact flash of the tree lights on that morning. The green and gold caught in the glass ornaments and bounced off the varnished floor. The house smelled like sugar and pine. Somebody had left a mug of steaming eggnog on the coffee table, and a half-open card where the cat had been sleeping the night before. It was ordinary in that particular blessed way that makes you let your guard down. Then I noticed the present. It was small, smaller than I expected, tucked at the front of the pile like an afterthought. Clean wrapping, no creases, a ribbon tied with the kind of perfect loop that suggested it had been wrapped by someone who wraps gifts professionally, or by someone who was taking a curious, nervous care. The tag had my name on it, my name in a looping, old-fashioned cursive I didn't recognize. None of us wrote like that. "Who's that from?" I asked, already feeling the hair on my neck prick. Mom looked up from her cup and blinked. "Not me." Dad shook his head slowly. "Not from us." Claire, half asleep and delighted, was lightly shaking one of her own packages and didn't notice. A small laugh escaped me, the nervous, unsure kind, and Dad made the joke about Santa working overtime. We opened the other gifts, scarves, a board game, little things that fit perfectly into our small family's life. But that box kept sitting there like a pebble in your shoe. I was the one to tear the paper. The moment the ribbon came away, something cold and missing loosened in my stomach. Inside was a small wooden box, varnished dark and smellingly of old polish. The latch gave with a soft click. I nearly dropped it when I opened it. Inside lay my necklace. Not a similar piece, mine. The same tiny crescent moon pendant, the hairline scratch on its back where I'd nicked it on the locker bench, the way the chain had been knotted the last time I'd tried to fix it. I hadn't told anyone about losing it. I'd lost it the month before, the exact sequence of events still fresh enough that I could see it. Gym locker, the clumsy shove of girls running late, my chest tight when it wasn't there anymore. After looking, asking, and retracing steps, I'd assumed it was gone. How was this possible? I kept saying the first dozen times I tried to explain. We all tried to make sense of it. Maybe Claire had brought something home and Dad wrapped it. Maybe a neighbor had found it and put it under the tree to surprise me. But the handwriting, the polish on the wood, none of it fit. And the more we looked, the more little impossibilities threaded through that morning. Claire's extra gift, a stack of sketchbooks, the exact brand she'd been hoarding in her locker, the obscure paper she loved. She'd only ever used them at school. My mom's perfume, the discontinued floral she'd worn in college, and mentioned once, offhand, months ago. Dad unwrapped a slim wallet. When he opened it, his face went white. Inside was a photograph of him with a woman I didn't recognize. A picture visibly older than their marriage, folded and worn at the edges. A receipt clipped behind it dated years before any of us knew her name. It stopped feeling like coincidence around about the time Mom found the folded note shoved under Claire's sketchbooks. No signature, just a line in the same looping cursive. I remember. That's when the unease changed color. It wasn't just the strangeness of perfectly chosen presents. It was intimacy. Someone knew things they had no business knowing. Someone had been watching the pockets of our lives. We cleared the room slowly, moved the coffee table, checked vents and behind curtains, groped through cupboards. It was an instinctual, ridiculous search for cameras or microphones. There was nothing. No lens in the ornaments, no reflective dot in the smoke detector glass. Dad laughed then, too sharp, too cold, and said we were being ridiculous. He called it invasion of privacy paranoia. Still, he called the police. They came in a thin, efficient way, one uniform, then another, badges shining. The officer took notes politely, asked me and Claire to describe the necklace, where I'd last seen it, asked Dad about anyone who might hold a grudge, anyone who'd have reason to stage a mystery. The questions were the kind that carve a little hollow out of you. Who do you hate? Who would want to scare you? It's invasive because indirectly, it asks you to define the danger in yourself. They dusted around the doorstep, slid a camera under the eaves for a few nights. They called neighbors. For a day or two, the neighborhood felt like a fishbowl of good manners. People smiled a little harder when they passed us, as if by performing normality they could close off the weirdness that had found us. And then there were small things. A paper bag on the porch one evening with a single postcard inside, addressed to no one, washed a bit at the edges, with the same scripted handwriting. Watching fits the season. A single glove on the fence rail between our yard and the next. Not mine, not Dad's. Too small for any of the neighbors. When Claire walked to school a week later, she told me she felt eyes on her from across the street. I brushed it off, and then, later that night, traced muddy shoe prints that stopped and began again at the far side of our yard, as if someone had paced and endlessly repaced a path just out of sight. Dad tried to be a rock, joked about security cameras, replaced our front lock, propped a motion sensor light above the porch. He made them practical. New deadbolts, a bright timer on the tree lights so they'd come on earlier. But that Christmas, the practical things felt small against the slow, patient knowledge implied by the gifts. We called friends and neighbors. Someone offered a sob story about a long-ago lost trinket returned by a cleaning service. Another said maybe an ex-lover finally had the courage to apologize. But people were talking in hushed uncertainty more than helpful sympathy. A rumor began that a woman in our town had been seen carrying jewelry out of an estate sale weeks before. Another rumor, more fanciful, more frightening, that someone had been going through the high school locker rooms after hours. None of it was proof. Sleep thinned. Claire began to wander at night, checking the window by the tree as if waiting for a second gift. I woke to the sound of Dad creeping through the kitchen at 2 a.m., calling the locksmith on his phone in a whisper. My mother, who had been the most placid of the three of us, started locking the inner doors at night and carrying a small brass alarm hooked to her keychain. We had turned the house into a fortress that smelled of pine and fear. 2 weeks later, the pattern escalated. I came home from a shift at the coffee shop and found the tree lights off. The neighborhood was silent except for the whistling wind. On the doormat there was a bag, the same glossy paper from the box that had contained my necklace. Inside were 3 Polaroids, the kind old-timers still used. One of Mom, taken as she left for work one morning, her face in profile. One of Claire laughing with friends outside school. One of Dad opening a business envelope in the garage. The photos were recent. The dates printed faintly on the white margins matched the last 10 days. That evening, everything clicked into a new register. We stopped pretending this was romantic or sentimental, or a prank. We stopped sleeping. We increased the police patrols. Someone from the station, a younger woman with tired eyes who came more than once now, suggested we file for a stalking report, to get something on file. She explained the language. Pattern, intent, reasonable fear. We did it. The officer took the Polaroids, documented the glove, the postcard. She recommended we check our email logs and asked for any CCTV from neighbors. She asked me if I wanted a panic button app on my phone, recommended community watch meetings, and, in a voice I'll never forget, said, "People like this aren't looking for dramatic reveals. They want you to feel watched." That observation ate at me. Feeling orchestrated felt worse than anything more overt. If the goal was to make you question your life, to place scars on the inside of ordinary days, then someone was succeeding. We could secure locks and set alarms, but that sense of being arranged like a doll in a room, that was harder to screw back together. We started sleeping in shifts. Dad would sit up reading by flashlight for an hour, then I would. My mother took to setting the phone on speaker in the kitchen, listening for phantom footsteps. Neighborhood parents rotated evening walks and peered into hedges. In the middle of this, the familiar rituals of Christmas, Movies on the couch, the leftover cinnamon rolls, became tissue-thin attempts at normality. By February, but not yet spring, when soft rain had replaced the hush of snow, the police called. They had found something. Not a face, not an address to ring a bell at. A passerby near an industrial strip had found a bundle tightly wrapped under a bush. The box from under our tree, its polish dulled, the ribbon frayed. No fingerprints, a drop of amber wax. Nearby, shoe prints heading to the road and stopping where a car had idled. The license plate was partial. It was the closest thing to a trail we'd seen. Months stretched. The emotional work of recovering from being watched had its own timeline. Therapy for Claire, Dad flying off into quiet rages for which I had no language then, Mom lying awake cataloging every visitor's name. The photographs stopped appearing. The postcards ended. The glove did not return. We changed our routines, our routes, who drove whom home. We replaced the mailbox with a larger metal one bolted to a concrete post that insisted, physically, that something else was different now. Did the person stop? Did we scare them off? We never found out. We never had a face to feed into a headline. There was an ugly relief in that. No confrontation, no moment of closure. The box containing my necklace had been found under a bush instead of under the tree, but it came back to us intact. My mother would sometimes stroke the pendant in her hand and say, "Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe someone found it and wanted to write it, in their own way." Dad would shake his head and answer, "Or maybe they were sending a message." Years later, I'll still search the yard before letting Claire, now grown and living nearby, walk her dog. I still double-check the locks. I catch my chest with a small automatic fear at the scratch of a notepaper at the doorstep. And sometimes, at night, I'll wake and count the spaces between our breaths. We moved finally the summer after that Christmas. Not because of one scarred morning, but because no one in our house could remember the texture of the safe. Not anymore. The new house had newer locks and fewer ornaments from someone else's life. But sometimes, when I unwrap a small gift and find it perfectly wrapped, my first thought is not joy. It is the slow, unwelcome memory of a tidy cursive on white paper and the way the world rearranged itself around me that year. A reminder that sometimes what is given back is never the same as what was taken. I signed up for the caroling group because I was tired of the same small apartment Christmases, the takeout, the same 2 streaming specials, the persistent hum of the radiator. The flyer at the community center promised hot chocolate, new people, and an old-fashioned door-to-door caroling experience. I wanted old-fashioned. I wanted to feel like I belonged to something for a night. Our leader was a retired choir director named Eleanor. She had a laugh like sleigh bells and a clipboard full of routes. The group was an odd little mix. College kids looking for seasonal extracurriculars, a pair of retirees with matching wool caps, a nurse who said singing soothed her after long shifts, a young dad who wanted to show his son what community meant. I fit somewhere in the middle, late 20s, new to town, too many New Year resolutions and not enough courage to keep them. The first night was harmless, the kind of wholesome I'd expected. We practiced 3 carols in a church hall warmed by a space heater, sipped Eleanor's thermos tea, and walked out into snow-silenced streets. Houses lit up like lanterns. People came to doorways with mugs and smiles and coins for the kids' collection tin. A few homes even invited us in for more than the chorus. A bowl of chili here, a string of stories there. We left feeling that old warm glow. Shall we meet next Thursday? Yes. See you then. It started disappearing slowly. It crept up like frost on a window, barely noticeable at first, then pervasive. Week 2, the college kids didn't show. They said finals, or a job, or a family emergency. A text later told the group they were sorry, something came up, and the message thread moved on. Week 2's route was shorter, and the abandoned house on Larkspur, the one with the porch swing and the ornate wreath, had its lights off. We knocked anyway, no answer. We sang anyway, our voices thin and together, and then we left. By week 3, the nurse stopped coming. She'd told us, on the second night, that her hospital was understaffed and the shift couldn't be swapped. She didn't answer the coordinator's calls after that. Probably over time, Eleanor said, chasing optimism. Hospital work runs on strange schedules. She'll be back. She didn't. The retiree couple texted after week 3. Family emergency. Sorry. Their replies were short, and the little red heart reaction felt like someone pinching the heat out of the thread. Now we were 5 people instead of 8. We rearranged the route. Eleanor's face had a creased line I'd never seen before when she marked the houses we'd keep. 5 became 4. The young dad got a last-minute trip with his work. He said, "I'd never want to leave my kid out, but work is work." His son's cheeks were pink in every photo he'd sent. He disappeared the same week. There are ways groups fragment without fear. Life fractures people all the time, but the way they left us felt different. No one quit angrily. No one ghosted with a cold text. They just didn't come back. The night the silence widened and bit into my stomach happened a little before Christmas. Snow had been falling for 3 days, a soft, relentless white that muffled footsteps and made breath into little lamps. We met in the church hall as always, heads bent over pews, stroking hymnals. Eleanor, herself shaking a little as she stirred her tea, tried to keep things normal. "Tonight we do the north side loop," she said, checking her clipboard. 3 streets, 6 houses. We'll keep it short. Remember to stay with the group. Don't split up. We walked. Candles glittered in windows. A Labrador barked from a porch. We sang Silent Night at an elderly woman's house and were handed scones that smelled like nutmeg. The last stop was a squat gray house at the end of a cul-de-sac. It had no wreath, no lights, just a mailbox half buried in snow. The walkway looked like it hadn't been used in weeks. Still, the address matched Eleanor's list. We knocked. No answer at first. The porch light clicked on when we did. It showed a single set of footprints leading away through the deep snow. Footsteps toward the street, then vanishing, as if whoever had left had simply dissolved into the night. We sang. Our voices, mine particularly, felt brittle, like twigs. Eleanor's voice held the melody and kept us anchored. There was a steadiness in her tone that I wanted to mimic. When the song finished, the front door creaked. I can still hear the long sound of it, like an exhale straight out of a sleep. The door opened a fraction, and there was nothing in the frame. No face leaned out, no hand, only darkness. A woman's voice floated from the threshold. "I'll just stand at the door. You can sing for me if you like." It was thin, like paper. Eleanor thanked her kindly. We sang again. The sound of our voices wrapped the house in warmth, then faded into the cold. When we left, the group exchanged the same wordless look that had started to follow us whenever anything odd happened. A whisper of fear that made our breath loud. No one joked that night. No one asked about coffee afterward. We went our separate ways, 3 people wading through snow. 2 nights later, I learned that the house at the end of the cul-de-sac had burned. The story on the local news was small and quick and inexplicably clinical. Nighttime blaze contained. No occupants at the time. Cause under investigation. They showed images of blackened walls and firefighters' hoses curled like sleeping snakes. I texted the group thread a link. Eleanor read it in the car and didn't respond for an hour. Then she wrote, "Please come tonight. It's my turn to be brave." She posted the meeting time, and I felt the old nearness of belonging and the new weight of dread. That night, we were 4. We walked in near silence, the snow pressing against our boots. We stuck closer to each other, and every so often we'd glance at Eleanor, whose hands were wrapped around the thermos like a talisman. Our first stop was on a narrow lane with old brick houses. It was a warm, ordinary night at first. Curtains parted, children watching, doors opening with smiles. At the 3rd house, a middle-aged man came to the threshold. He had a friendly, normal face, and he invited us inside. He had a bowl of punch. He had stories about the neighborhood and handed us styrofoam cups that tasted like hospital air. His eyes were too keen. He smiled like a person polishing a knife with a handkerchief. We sang. We left. The man waved, and something in his wave was asking to be followed. By the fifth house, our numbers were 3. The young teacher had taken a call and texted that she needed to leave. "It's my neighbor, I'm so sorry." And she melted into the night. The streetlights looked like lanterns hung by unseen hands. The last house on our route was a 2-story that smelled faintly of oranges inside. Someone had put out a platter by the doorway. We sang. We knocked. The door didn't open immediately. When it did, the way it opened is what I can never fully unsee. The door cracked, and a hand, an old, paper-thin hand, thrust out, clutching at nothing. Then the door opened fully, and inside was a room perfectly staged for Christmas. A tree, a mantel with stockings, a TV showing a silent snow scene. But on the sofa sat a woman whose face was turned away from us. Her hair fell in a dark sheet, and the curve of her back was caught like an animal in the lens of a camera. "She can't hear us," a man's voice said behind the woman. It was the man from the lane. "She used to love carols." We sang for a minute more. The man watched. His pupils swallowed his irises. I felt the blood in my ears, and my hands clutched at the hymnal until the corners creased. As we were leaving, Eleanor whispered, "Check on her. Make sure she's all right." No one moved. No one wanted to be the one to step across that doorway and into the staged room that smelled faintly of rot under the oranges. On the street, it started to snow harder, and the flakes looked like paper confetti. I stepped on a print in the fresh powder, and somewhere in my chest a small animal of panic woke. We made our way down the hill, deciding to shorten the route and finish early. Our breath fogged the air. At the junction where the lane met the main road, the man from the lane waited for us with a thermos and 2 cups. He held one out to Eleanor like an offering. We declined. He smiled, the same smile he had in the doorway. The way he looked at Eleanor was a thing of hunger. He asked where we were from. He asked how often we sang. He told us about a caroling troupe that used to come through town decades ago, and how a jug of cider had once cost less than the price of a song. I felt small and foolish, and trapped in a memory that wasn't mine. The next day, the teacher didn't come to work. Her apartment door was found open. Her keys were still inside. She never answered texts. The retired couple didn't return calls. The young dad's phone went straight to voicemail. The patrolman at the police station said it sometimes happens during the holidays. People slipping away, trouble with travel, relationship arguments. And he gave the kind of sympathetic smile intended to be a bandage. But that night, 2 more people on our group list stopped answering. And then the house at the end of the cul-de-sac, the one with the footprints that vanished, was found with a video camera mounted on its eaves. The footage, when the police finally released parts of it, showed nothing outside the house during the night of the knock. Only the snow, the dark porch, our 4 shadows singing at the threshold. The camera picked up our breaths. It picked up the door cracking open. It picked up an outline of a figure standing in the doorway. When the door opened wider, the resolution blurred into something like static, and the house lights stuttered, as if someone had turned them off and on through a fog. I stopped sleeping. I started carrying my car keys in one fist so tight my knuckles went white. Eleanor called me the morning after and left a voice message that began with a tremor and then steadied into a kind of resolve. She said, "Meet me and bring the thermos. Tonight I will not be the only one to be brave." I showed up anyway. It was snowing hard, the kind that lays down silence like a blanket. The church hall smelled like wet wool and coffee. There were 3 of us now, me, Eleanor, and the young dad, his eyes hollow. We walked in a line, feet falling in the same grooves, the air like cut glass. We reached a narrow street where the houses lean in like listeners. We sang each song and knocked each time. The last house had the porch light on. We knocked, and no one answered. The door cracked, and a face half hidden in shadow peered out. It was the woman from the sofa, her hair shorn in a way that revealed a scalp dotted with faded bruises. When she looked at us, her pupils were too wide, like coin holes. The man stood behind her, smiling. He gestured toward the thermos in Eleanor's hand. "Please," he whispered, and his voice dropped into soup-thick cadence. "Would you like to come in? We have room." Something in the way he said "we" made the snow stop in the air. All the light seemed to congregate in his smile. He took a slow step forward, as if to welcome us onto a stage. Eleanor's mouth tipped into a small, brittle smile. She tilted the thermos, and nectar-colored steam rose. The man reached for it. I don't remember everything after that. My memory is a jigsaw of glass. The man's hand closed around the thermos. He held it to his lips and tilted his head back. The woman stumbled, and a sound seeped out of her throat that was half a sob and half a release. Then the man whose smile cut like a file, looked up at us and laughed. Not the laugh of a person delighted by hospitality, but the dry, thin laugh of a predator who has been waiting to make sure the prey believes the offer. Eleanor's face folded. She took a sip from one of the cups the man passed back to us. Her eyes rolled gently. She sagged as if someone had let go of her strings. The dad and I grabbed her as she fell, calling her name until the snow tasted like copper on my tongue. The neighbor looked relieved. "See," he said softly. "It warms you." We ran. We ran and ran until our lungs burned. We left our hymnals on the sidewalk and didn't stop until the lights of the town were behind us. Later, the police found traces of a sedative in Eleanor's blood. There was no high-profile arrest. There were no dramatic rescues. People told me the man in the lane had a criminal record for possession and for odd disturbances years ago and had been quiet in recent times. The press did a small piece and moved on. The teacher's apartment was empty, but for a note that said, "I needed a way." The retiree couple's house was open. The television paused. The young dad's phone was turned off for a week. I left the caroling group after that. I stopped singing for neighbors. I stopped answering doorbells on cold nights. Even walking past the church hall makes me tense. I still see their faces in the margins of my thoughts. Eleanor smiling with teeth I no longer trust. The dad hollow as a drum. The teacher who disappeared like a ghost into the white night. Some nights, when a choir from a radio show plays in the background and the notes hover like birds, my fingers find an old hymn I once loved. I start to sing under my breath, softer than a secret. It is the only way I can hold the memory of the warmth without letting it fold into the shape of fear. The last time I drove past the lane where the man once stood, there were no footprints in the snow, no lights in the porches. The houses sat like closed mouths. In the window of one, a tree flickered faint and alone. I could not tell if the house belonged to anyone anymore. We used to come back each year, trying to reclaim the joy the way children sneak into a room to reclaim a toy. But the songs don't fit the same. They press against the teeth in my mouth. They echo in a place in my chest that keeps the shape of the memory. That warm thermos. The way a cup passed from stranger to stranger can mean either kindness or a veil. If you ever hear carols at your door late in a windless snow, don't assume they are harmless. There are nights when the songs are soft and safe, and there are nights when they are bait. The melodies are the same. It is the silence between the notes you should watch. The office Christmas party had always been more of a formality than a celebration. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, bouncing off gray cubicle walls that even dollar store tinsel and cheap garland couldn't disguise. The tree was a fake one we dragged out every December, its branches permanently bent from years of being crammed into a box. Still, there were trays of finger foods from the deli down the street, a couple of bottles of sale wine, and, what everyone secretly looked forward to, Secret Santa. This year, I had the misfortune of organizing it. I wrote out the names, folded them into slips of paper, and drew them myself, partly to prevent cheating, partly because I'd learned the hard way not to trust Karen from accounting. 24 employees, 24 gifts. I triple-checked the list, checked the closet for extra wrapping paper, and still felt the knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. By the time the party started, my stomach felt like it was full of tacks. The room smelled of reheated meatballs and plastic cups of wine. Laughter bounced off the walls, but it felt forced, brittle. I tried to ignore it, focusing on keeping everything organized. Then, I noticed them. 25 wrapped boxes stacked neatly under the tree. My pulse stuttered. At first, I tried to dismiss it. Maybe someone had a guest. Maybe it was an extra gag gift, or an intern with a misplaced sense of humor. But the sight refused to fade from my mind. That extra box? It didn't belong. We began distributing gifts. The room filled with polite laughter, awkward thank yous, and muted excitement. A pair of novelty socks, a Starbucks gift card, a cactus for someone's desk. The usual. I tried to keep a smile plastered on my face while my eyes kept drifting toward the mysterious extra box, a black knot in the corner of my vision. Then it was time for the last gift. It was small, wrapped in crisp silver paper that looked far too professional for our makeshift party. A silver bow perched neatly on top, and the tag read, in perfect cursive, "To the 25th guest." At first, there was laughter. "Who's the mystery guest?" Someone snorted. "Maybe Santa showed up this year." A few giggles, half-hearted. But no one stepped forward. The laughter faltered. The room went quiet. Because I was the organizer, all eyes landed on me. I picked it up. The weight was strange, light, yet deliberate, almost knowing. My throat went dry. As I peeled away the paper, the metallic scent of the black box hit me first, sharp and metallic, making my stomach twist. Inside was a plain black box, matte cardboard, snug lid, nothing to indicate a gift. I hesitated. The room was silent except the Hamptons in winter was a world apart from its sun-soaked summer self. Empty streets stretched like white ribbons between dark, silent houses. Every porch light was a small island in a sea of snow, and every home seemed to hold its breath, waiting for someone, anyone, to disturb the quiet. My family and I arrived a week before Christmas, a rare early arrival that left the house unusually still. The end-of-road property was surrounded by pines heavy with snow, their tips swaying gently in the cold wind. A place that usually promised escape now felt like an isolated island. My dad and I arrived first. Mom and my younger sister were wrapping up work at the city office, so we took the opportunity to settle in early. Inside, the house smelled faintly of dust and pine cleaner, and the wood floors creaked under our boots. My dad busied himself with the heat, the water, and all the little mechanical details that made a winter stay bearable. I, meanwhile, retreated to my room with my PS3, letting the flickering light from the screen and the muffled hush of the snowfall outside create a fragile sense of comfort. The first night, a blizzard rolled in. By morning, the Hamptons were a ghost town under a thick, blinding layer of snow. The road in and out of our cul-de-sac was impassable. It should have felt cozy, but the silence pressed down on the house like a weight. I discovered the first snowman the next morning. My dad was staring out the kitchen window, frown creasing his forehead. "Did you build a snowman?" he asked casually, though his eyes betrayed curiosity. I froze. Outside, perfectly aligned to face the house, stood a snowman just over 2 feet tall. Stick arms stretched out awkwardly, coal eyes glinting in the gray morning light, and a crude smile carved across its icy face. "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. I hadn't built it. My dad hadn't. He shrugged. "Maybe a neighbor kid?" His voice carried an edge of uncertainty he tried to hide. I wanted to believe him. I told myself it was innocent, a prank by some bored children. But even as I pulled my scarf tighter around my neck, a shiver ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Something about the snowman's smile, too perfectly placed, felt deliberate, observant, waiting. The next night, the sense of unease grew. I was asleep when a sharp thump jolted me awake. My bedroom window rattled lightly, the kind of sound that makes your heart lurch in the dead of night. Maybe it was a branch snapping under the weight of snow, I told myself. Still, I couldn't ignore the pit of dread settling in my stomach. I lay in bed, willing my pulse to slow, the blankets pulled tight around my shoulders. After a tense minute, curiosity, or perhaps foolish courage, won. I crept to the window, pulling aside the curtain. The sight froze me. A second snowman had appeared overnight. Larger than the first, nearly 4 feet tall, its features more menacing. The grin that had seemed benign now looked like a smirk, and it faced my window. Its twig arms were positioned as if it were leaning slightly forward, studying me. My breath fogged the glass. My fingers clutched the curtain, shaking, and for a moment I swore the snowman's coal eyes had shifted. I screamed for my dad. He came rushing in, flashlight in hand, concern etched across his face. Seeing the snowman, his lips pressed into a tight line. He grabbed his coat. "Stay here," he said. The backyard was deep under fresh snow, and our footprints were quickly covered by falling flakes. Dad inspected the yard thoroughly. No footprints approached the snowman. No tracks leading from the road or neighbors' properties. He checked the fence, the hedges, the pines. Nothing. Whoever had made these was careful, or brazen. I stayed glued to my room window for the rest of the night. Every falling snowflake seemed to carry a hidden threat. The storm outside masked any other sounds. But inside, my chest tightened with the knowledge that someone had been in our yard, and whoever it was, they had left a message in the form of snow. For the next several days, Dad patrolled the house. He checked the perimeter multiple times, peered into empty neighboring homes, and even considered installing cameras, though in our remote cul-de-sac, none would capture every angle. The snowmen remained, growing in number and size. Each morning, a new one awaited discovery. A 3-foot figure near the fence, another crouched closer to the porch. No footprints connected them. Each one bore subtle, deliberate differences. A scarf here, a stick in a crooked position there. I stopped sleeping through the nights. I would lie awake, listening to every creak and sigh of the house, every whisper of wind, every shifting shadow in the corners of the room. I convinced myself it was all in my head, until Christmas Eve. That evening, the rest of the family arrived. Mom, my sister, and grandparents. The living room smelled faintly of pine and my grandmother's cinnamon cookies. A fire burned in the fireplace, casting dancing shadows against the walls. I wanted to relax, wanted the tension to break. Then came the knock. Hard, deliberate, echoing through the quiet house. We froze. Dad approached slowly, hand brushing the deadbolt. "Who's there?" he called, voice steady despite the thrum of panic in his chest. A voice, thin and quivering, replied from outside. "Please, let me in. I have no one to spend Christmas with. Please, help me." Dad's jaw tightened. "You need to leave before we call the police." "Okay, I'll leave. Please, don't call the police," the voice whispered before retreating. Silence followed. No footsteps, no rustling. Just the cold wind sighing across the snow-laden yard. We connected this immediately to the snowman. The intruder had escalated from silent observation to direct contact. And now, standing in our home, I realized how vulnerable we were in a place that had once felt safe. Christmas morning brought the final confirmation. A note had been taped to the front door, written in uneven, trembling letters. I only wanted to have a little fun. I built the snowman for the boy who plays the noisy games. I watch when no one is looking. I don't have anyone to spend Christmas with. A crooked fingerprint smudged the lower corner of the paper, and the jagged lines of the letters suggested urgency or anxiety. I traced the words with my fingers, imagining the hands that had written them. Someone had been watching us for a week, studying us, planning. We never discovered who had left the snowman or the note. Police found no prints beyond the obvious footprints leading from the road, and the quiet cul-de-sac yielded no witnesses. Neighbors were absent. The streets remained silent. It was as if the intruder had melted back into the white landscape, leaving nothing but snow, cold, and a lingering sense of dread. In the weeks afterward, snow no longer carried joy for me. Every flake reminded me of the careful construction of the snowmen, their silent observation, the deliberate intrusion into our lives. That Christmas, the Hamptons' winter serenity had transformed into a frozen stage for something patient, calculating, human. Months later, I still remember. Sometimes I imagine the small stick arms reaching out, beckoning. Sometimes when I walk past a snow-covered yard, I feel eyes on me. And I cannot shake the certainty that whoever built those snowmen could return, watching, waiting for another family to answer their knock. The snowmen, harmless in appearance, became a lasting lesson. The quietest, most peaceful places are often the ones that hide the most watchful eyes. We went up to the cabin to escape. No schedules, no notifications, just a weekend of wood smoke, cinnamon rolls, and bad movies. A winter storm promised to bury the road by midnight, so we packed extra blankets and a generator that never quite felt reliable. I never imagined the thing that would make that night unforgettable wasn't the weather, but the footsteps that circled the house when the lights went out. The drive up had been slow and tense, snow coming down hard enough to smear taillights into red blurs. My cousin Mara drove like she'd been born on snow, calm, precise, hands steady on the wheel. Behind us were Aunt Kay and her husband Mark in their Subaru, two teenagers in the back arguing about whether the hot tub would actually work this time, and me wedged in with a cooler and a duffel bag, planning which book I'd actually start before sleep won. The cabin was familiar, our family's rented retreat for years. It squatted at the edge of a ridge, logs dark with age, porch sagging but sturdy, wide windows looking out over a valley that the snow was already swallowing. Inside was the same cozy jumble as always. Mismatched mugs, VHS tapes stacked like relics, quilts that smelled faintly of cedar. Christmas decorations from past families lingered too. A ceramic reindeer missing an antler, a box of tangled string lights, a paper star taped to the mantel. We unpacked with the usual bustle, boots clumping, breath-fogging windows. Mark stacked firewood while Aunt Kay reheated cinnamon rolls, their sugar and spice scent filling the kitchen. Mara declared phones off after dinner. The kids groaned but obeyed. It felt wholesome, like we'd stepped sideways out of time. By early evening, the storm was flexing its muscle. First, distant street lamps winked out one by one. Then the wind hit the cabin like a living thing. The generator coughed, sputtered, and died. We laughed it off. Candles, oil lamps, the fire. What was a Christmas cabin without them? We pulled blankets close and played scratchy carols on the old record player. The children made shadow puppets in the lamplight. For a moment, it was postcard perfect, the kind of scene you'd think back on wistfully, until we heard it. It was close to midnight when the first crunch of boots sounded outside. At first, we assumed it was the kids sneaking in from outside, but the crunch didn't hurry or stumble. It circled, slow, measured, deliberate. Mark hushed us. The sound traced the length of the house, paused beneath a window, then continued toward the back. Mara peered out, squinting through swirling snow. "Boot prints," she whispered. "Big ones, fresh." But there were no neighbors nearby. No one should have been out there in thigh-deep snow. We did what people do when the world turns strange. We sought control, bolted doors, checked windows, gathered together. Mark went outside with a headlamp, ignoring Aunt Kay's trembling plea to stay. The crunching stopped as soon as he stepped out. When he returned, pale, he muttered, "No tracks. Nothing past the porch." That was worse than hearing the footsteps. Minutes later, something rapped on the front door. Not a polite knock, more like a test, knuckles pounding wood like a drumbeat. We froze. Then came the voice, hoarse, pleading. "Please, let me in. I'm so cold." Mark cracked the storm door. Wind howled through, carrying the metallic scent of snow. A gloved hand rested on the railing. A shadow swayed. We offered food instead of shelter. Mark slid a basket of rolls onto the step, hands shaking. The figure snatched it with impossible speed and sprinted into the trees. Relief came in a nervous laugh, until we saw the note left behind. We appreciated the hospitality. See you in the dark. The next night, it began again. Crunch, circle, pause. Another note on the porch. Nice tree. Sleep well. On the third night, thank you for the bread. I'll be nearby. We took turns on watch, hung Christmas lights outside, rigged to motion sensors, kept the shotgun by the door. The children stopped whispering about Santa and started whispering about him. Then came the boots. A pair hung from the maple out front, knotted by their laces and swaying like a cruel ornament. We called the sheriff. They came, made their report, promised morning patrols, but at night, it was just us and the crunching snow. It happened on the fourth night, around 2 a.m. The storm had quieted, the world muffled. I was on watch, nursing bad coffee, when the steps came again. Slower this time, purposeful. They stopped under the children's window. Glass cracked, a pane splintered outward. We hit the alarm. Before the echo faded, a figure shoved through the window, hunched and deliberate. He moved like he belonged, like he'd rehearsed this. Mark fired a warning shot. The man crumpled, not dead, but shocked, breath ragged. His eyes weren't wild. They were worshipful, like he'd finally entered a sacred space. The deputies hauled him out, cuffed and muttering about visiting warm houses. He admitted he'd been watching cabins for months, sneaking close, leaving gifts of fear. The paper called him a transient. To us, he was something else entirely. A reminder that kindness and danger wear the same mask when seen through frost. We left the cabin the next morning, exhausted, the road finally plowed. The kids were silent, clutching blankets like shields. Back home, I couldn't stop replaying the sound of those footsteps, steady, circling, choosing. I decorated my apartment that year, but when I strung the lights and poured the cocoa, it all felt thinner. Even now, when snow falls heavy, I swear I hear it again. Crunch. Circle. Pause. See you in the dark. I thought a quiet Christmas alone in a remote cabin would be a welcome escape. A chance to breathe, write, and forget the city. But solitude has a way of magnifying the smallest unease. And that winter, the silence outside my window became something far darker than I could have imagined. It started with a shape in the snow. I rented the cabin in the heart of the West Virginia mountains, miles from the nearest road, untouched by civilization. I was a ghostwriter struggling to find inspiration, desperate to escape the deadlines and noise of the city. The idea of seclusion felt perfect. A few weeks of skiing, writing, and sleeping without interruption. The first 2 weeks passed in blissful monotony. Mornings were crisp and silent, afternoons filled with the rhythmic scratch of pen on paper, and nights crackled with firelight. The snow outside formed a seamless white cocoon, muffling the world. I felt lighter, unburdened, and slowly began to remember what peace felt like. But then came the final week. One night, I woke suddenly. The room was still. My breath came in short puffs that misted the cold glass of the window. Something outside had drawn my attention, though I couldn't place it. And then I saw it. A snowman stood in the clearing, perfectly still, its coal-black eyes catching the moonlight like two tiny voids. A crooked carrot nose, a thin branch for an arm pointing vaguely in my direction. A top hat canted at an impossible angle. I froze, my stomach knotting. At first, I told myself it was a trick of fatigue. After all, it was winter. My mind was easily fooled. But the snowman was far from the cabin. Too far for anyone to have built it without leaving tracks I would surely see. And it was looking at me. The next day, I ventured outside. The snowman remained. No footprints, no traces of a passerby. Nothing except the crisp, untouched snow around it. I knocked it over with trembling hands, feeling a fleeting sense of control as it collapsed into a heap of icy fragments. Relief washed over me, temporary but welcome. That night, sleep was impossible. At 2 a.m., a soft thud on the window jolted me upright. I froze. My heart pounded as I glanced outside, and there it was, standing tall, intact, staring. The snowman had returned. My mind raced. Surely it wasn't human. Footprints, none. Movement, impossible. Yet every sense screamed that it was watching, waiting. I huddled in bed, heart hammering, muscles taut with anticipation. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, but beneath the sound of snow shifting and branches creaking, there was a rhythm. Deliberate. Thud. Pause. Thud. Pause. I spent the next day in near paralysis. I refused to leave the cabin, yet could not shake the thought of that figure in the snow. My writer's curiosity battled my terror, pulling me toward the window again and again, only to see the same unblinking gaze. Each glance left me more hollow inside, the forest feeling like a living entity, patient and malevolent. On the third night, I forced myself outside, wrapped in every layer I owned, gripping a flashlight as if it could ward off the impossible. The snowman stood where it always had, but this time I noticed the footprints, a loop around the clearing too large for a human, as if something enormous had circled deliberately and returned to its place. My breath came in shaky gasps. I called out. No reply. Only silence, broken by the occasional crack of a branch under unseen weight. Inside the cabin, I discovered other oddities. Snow shoveled against the door like a barrier. Small icicles had been snapped off trees and placed in strange patterns in the yard. Even my firewood had been disturbed slightly, stacked with unnatural precision. My rational mind screamed that it must be human, or at least earthly, but every detail defied normal explanation. Sleep became a cruel joke. Each night the thuds against the window grew more forceful, more deliberate, each one punctuated by the feeling of eyes boring into my skull. I started hearing whispering when alone, imagining footsteps on the snow even when no one was outside. My notebook became a journal of fear, pages filled with frantic scribbles, sketches of footprints, and repeated, "It's watching me," in shaky ink. The final night, exhaustion and panic forced me to confront the impossible. I bundled up and stepped into the darkness. The air cut my skin like knives, and the snow crunched beneath my boots. I approached the clearing slowly, flashlight slicing thin lines through the shadowed woods. And then I saw it. Not a snowman, not exactly. A tall figure, angular and crooked, resembling the snowman but somehow alive, shifting slightly with the wind, as if it could sense me. My flashlight flickered, and for a terrifying moment, I was certain it had moved. The footprints told the same story, circled, deliberate, impossible. I realized with horror that this was not an ordinary snowman. It was an embodiment of winter, of isolation, of my fear. I fled the cabin that morning, leaving everything behind. Ski poles, notebooks, even the firewood. I drove back toward civilization, the memory of those coal-black eyes etched into my mind. I never returned, never even considered it. Even now, years later, in a quiet, snow-covered night, I feel it again. A weight, a gaze from the darkness, a reminder that solitude can expose you to things you cannot fully explain, and that sometimes the simplest symbols of joy, like a snowman, can become vessels of terror. I never liked Christmas. People assume I'm bitter, but it's not that simple. It's fear. A slow, seasonal panic that rises in my chest as December wears on. Something comes for me every Christmas Eve. For 17 years, it has drawn closer. It started when I was 12. That year, a brutal snowstorm swept through town, knocking out power. My parents thought it was magical. Christmas Eve by candlelight, the fire crackling in the hearth, Mom humming carols, Dad poking at the ham and joking about pioneer life. I, however, stood at the frosted living room window, tracing shapes in the condensation, a creeping unease curling in my stomach. And then I saw her. Not outside, not on the street, inside the glass. A woman, tall and impossibly pale, wearing a dress that looked centuries old. Her smile was wrong, too wide, lips barely moving. She pressed her palm against the glass. Wrong side, her hand flat against mine. I screamed. My parents rushed in, saw nothing but my own reflection. "It's a shadow," they said, "a trick of candlelight." I tried to nod, but my body trembled uncontrollably. That night, I slept with the lights on, hiding beneath the covers. By 13, her appearances had evolved. Sometimes she would show herself in reflections I hadn't noticed before, in the polished silver of the cutlery, in puddles forming near the porch, in the teardrop sheen of ornaments. Shadows flickered unnaturally behind me when I turned, though no one else saw them. I tried to tell friends. They laughed and called me paranoid. Slowly, I stopped speaking about it. At 14, I realized it wasn't just visual. I began hearing faint hums, distorted notes of Silent Night drifting through empty rooms. My parents dismissed it as imagination, and I felt both guilty and alone. I hated that Christmas, hated that I could not share the truth, hated that my own disbelief shook me as much as fear did. By 16, she wasn't just observing, she communicated. Lips never moving, yet words pressed into my mind. Come with me. My body froze every time. My parents' disbelief was a weight I carried daily. Friends abandoned the boy who refused to join in holiday cheer. I tried rituals. Salt along windowsills. Mirrors draped with towels. Cinnamon sticks burning until the smoke stung my eyes. I stayed awake, hiding under blankets, covering every reflective surface, convinced that if I fell asleep, she would take me. None of it worked. At 21, she escalated further. One Christmas Eve, I awoke to find her at the foot of my bed. Head tilted, hands folded like a bride waiting for a ceremony. Cold seeped into every bone, my breath forming clouds in the freezing room. She leaned closer, veins visible beneath translucent skin, eyes gleaming glassy and hungry. And then the clock struck midnight. She vanished. I realized she was bound by some rule. Christmas Eve, turning midnight. Each year she lingered longer. I've spent 17 years preparing for her. Boards nailed across windows, mirrors covered, candles burning endlessly. I feel her watching. Every draft, every flicker, every shadow seems to belong to her. Around 9, I glanced at the darkened TV screen. For a half second, her face stared back, lips curling into that awful knot smile. I slammed a blanket over it, heart hammering. By 10, the bathroom mirror fogged without reason. A handprint appeared, too long, too thin. My pulse skyrocketed. My hands shook, salt spilling from my fingers. By 11, the humming returned, slowed, warped, the notes bending unnaturally. My mother's voice twisted into something wrong, yet familiar. I covered my ears, but the sound burrowed into my skull. The wind moaned outside, snow piling against the boards like frozen fingers pressing through walls. The candle flames wavered as if breathing with her presence. I can feel her now, somewhere in the shadows, in the air itself. Hour by hour, my body betrayed me, heart racing, hands trembling, sweat freezing on my skin. I tried to will her away, but every reflex, every ritual, every ounce of courage failed. I remember small moments from my childhood now, small joys she tainted. Mom laughing as she decorated cookies, Dad lighting the fireplace. Memories now twisted into something sinister. She feeds on these echoes of normalcy. Now it's just before midnight. The candles are burning low. My pen keeps slipping in my sweaty hand. I don't think I'll keep her out this time. I can already see her in the candle flames. Smiling. Reaching. If anyone finds this story, know that I tried. I fought her for 17 years, but the woman in the Yule mirror doesn't stop. She waits. She wears you down. And I'm so tired. I can hear the clock ticking. Midnight is almost here. She's closer than ever. Maybe this really is my last Christmas. When I was a kid, Christmas meant the smell of pine and cinnamon, the thrill of paper ripping open, and a house bright with lights and tinsel. That stopped the year the town council voted to ban the holiday. They said it was a temporary measure after a rash of unexplained disappearances. They called it an abundance of caution. The parents liked that phrase, abundance of caution, because it made fear sound reasonable. The police liked it because it let them hand out extra overtime without the glare of a real emergency. The children were quiet and confused. We hung stockings anyway, arranged tiny villages under the tree, and strung lights on our porches as small, private rebellions. By the time I was old enough to understand the town's decision, Christmas had become something else, a rumor wrapped in glitter. No tree lighting ceremonies, no carolers on the streets, no neighborhood gatherings. The December air grew thinner somehow, like the town had exhaled and never breathed in again. Yet we decorated early, perhaps to prove to ourselves we were not living inside a permanent winter of fear. This year, I lived alone in the 2-story clapboard house my grandfather left me. 2 rooms, a sagging porch, and a heater that liked to cough and spit on cold mornings. It was a house full of things that weren't mine. Photographs with faces I did not recognize, a brass key that fit no lock I owned, a tin of unused matches. I liked it because it was honest. It felt lived in. It was a thin December night when a box appeared on my porch. The wind had been steady all day, pushing the bare branches into urgent messages. I was finishing up wrapping a last-minute present when my neighbor across the street, an elderly woman with a wry laugh, shouted over the fence about carolers. I lifted my head, and the porch light haloed a small brown package tucked against my doorstep, like a thoughtful animal seeking shelter. No note, no postmark. The paper was cheap craft paper, folded carefully and taped with care. Tied around it with a length of red twine was a small tag with my name written in a hand I didn't recognize. Inside, beneath a sheet of tissue, lay a mask. It was leathery and grotesque, not a cartoon elf or snowman, but a late-night craft project of someone obsessed with small detail. The nose was too narrow, the cheekbones sharp, the lips pulled into an expression that might once have been amusement, and now sat somewhere between a grin and a smirk. What froze me was not the mask itself, but the inside. Someone had written my name on the sweatband in blocky, deliberate letters, and beneath it an address, my childhood home, the one my parents sold years ago. A folded photograph tucked beneath the mask showed my younger self, grinning in front of a tree with a Santa hat crooked on my head. My heart did a small, staccato skip. I had not given anyone that photograph. I put the mask back in the box and closed it with hands that felt stranger than my own. The rational part of my brain began its work. Maybe a prank, maybe a neighbor with too much admiration for old traditions, maybe someone who'd found a bundle of discarded decorations in a thrift shop and thought to be clever. The irrational part sat like a stone and hummed. I left the box on the hall table and slept with every light in the house on. At 3 a.m, there was a knock at the door. Knocks are ordinary things. They are parcels and late friends and Jehovah's Witnesses. This knock was not ordinary. It was slow, 3 long, then 2 short, as if someone were tapping a message into the wood. I froze with the blanket bunched around my knees, listening to the rhythm. Every step in the house seemed audible. The old pipes groaning, the clock in the hall, my own breath. I padded silently to the window and peered through the blinds. Snow had started, a fine chalk of white that made halos around the street lamps. Outside, across the road, dozens of figures stood in the white. They were at the edge of the street and the white space beyond the park. They did not move. They were wearing masks, dozens of different masks, faces peering out like an army of lost puppets. Some had the same leather look as the one on my table. Some were simple ski masks. Many were homemade, patched together from fabric and glitter that never looked like fun in any light. A voice from the crowd carried to my porch, thin and surprisingly close. "Merry Christmas." It was the smallest, most ordinary chant. It was a child's greeting and a ceremonial line at once. The cadence landed like a stone. I checked the phone. No bars. The power lights on the street flickered, and the electronic hum of the neighborhood seemed to thin. I was suddenly cold, despite the heater's hiss. From the crowd, a figure stepped forward, slowly, like someone obeying an instruction they couldn't quite hear. The mask matched the one in the box exactly. The same narrow nose, the same half grin. He walked up the path without taking his leave too long to look left or right. He dropped something on my top step and turned, melting back into the standstill like fog folding around a lamppost. I did not open the door. Instead, I watched a shape slump over the object on the step and heard, in a voice that had lost any pretense of polite, "It's polite to reciprocate. We return what's given to us." When voices overlapped in the hush, the sound had a kind of rhyme. "Take what's yours, give what's mine." It was not a greeting as much as it was instruction, and it vibrated in the bones. I waited until the December morning's weak light bled in. Then I stepped to the door with the police on speed dial, though their connection was as thin as everyone else's. The package on the step was gone, but for a smear on the wood, a thumbprint of dark pigment, and strewn around it tiny scraps of paper like confetti. A neighbor, who had always loved Christmas but feared the town's winter superstitions, waved me over across her porch. "You weren't the only one," she said, too cheerful. "I found something similar on my stoop." Her voice dropped. "My aunt has one in the garage, too. People are saying, it's an invite." An invite to what? The question hung like frost on the air. Word moved through the neighborhood in fits and starts that day. People reported packages, masks, photos, ornaments, objects intimate enough to be invasive. Photos developed in the back of a purse and left on stoops. A child's mitten. A candy cane with a wrapper I recognized from a brand I used to love. There was a pattern. The objects were things lost, mislaid, or deliberately hidden years ago. They were personal flotsam dredged up and placed on thresholds. Rumors would later say someone had been snooping through attics and long-closed boxes for months. That might have been true. Or perhaps the masks belonged to people who had long ago learned to observe without being observed. Watchful citizens who studied routines. Whatever the mechanism, the result was the same. Under the thin layer of wired-together cheer, our town had someone who could find what you thought you'd buried. That night, the masks returned. They stood again, not just at my porch, but at every end of the street. Around 11, across the neighborhood, porch lights blinked on and off. And somewhere else, a radio crackled with an emergency voice. "Stay inside. Lock doors. Do not engage." The speaker's tone clipped and exhausted. Children's whispers threaded through the dark. Someone I knew from the hardware store climbed his steps and left a small decorated tree in the center of his yard with a note pinned to it. "Remember." Beneath it, a small photograph of the man as a boy, smiling into a camera. He claimed later he'd left it as an act of defiance, like a homeowner who refuses to hide. The town had been in a strange, low boil for days, and the masks made an attempt to push it into a full, hot panic. They were not violent, not that night. They were precise, ritualistic, and territorial. They wanted to announce themselves, to catalog, to make certain you knew what they knew. The small corners of your life you'd assumed were safe. Later, in the weeks that followed, the investigation would reveal fragments, nicknames, a man who wrote to no one, a group who called themselves caretakers of a city's forgotten rights. The police arrested a few people who had been traveling the county in the weeks before, buying up boxes of costume masks and cheap cameras. They held odd interviews and filed reports. Yet the masks and the packages, for those who found them, were not explained away by an arrest. A photograph tucked in a box is not undone by a badge. The feeling of being watched, cataloged again, this hung over the town long after the arrests. We kept our porch lights on that winter. We left no bowls of candy, no discarded ornaments on stoops. Kids whispered of traditions their parents would not let them practice. And on quiet nights, even when the snow made the world look tidy and sealed, I would look at my lock and think of the line of masks in the dark, their eyes small and neutral above slit mouths. I would think of the way someone had known which treasures of my past to pluck, the photograph, the mask, the memory, and how they had returned them like a judge returning verdicts. On the edge of town there is a monument now, a small plaque about vigilance and the resilience of community. At the bottom, someone has scratched one more message, older than civic language, simpler. It reads, "Remember to be careful what you put back out into the world. Sometimes it finds a way to come home." I keep that mask in the attic, wrapped in the same craft paper it arrived in, and sometimes in the dead of night I take the paper out and run my thumb along the inside. The name I saw written there is my name still, but the letters have been blurred by time and the heat of breath that is not mine. The neighbors no longer talk much about the masks. They are the things adults tuck away when children come by, the taboo subjects that scar a season. On certain nights, when the wind turns right and the snow falls with a particular, needle-fine hush, I step to the porch and listen. I can still hear, somewhere far off, the whisper of 3 long and 2 short knocks, and the thin voice that said once, in winter's dialect, "Merry Christmas." If you've made it this far, you're braver than most. Tell me in the comments, which story haunted you the most tonight? And if you had to live through just one of them, which would you choose to survive? And if you want to keep the fear close, even after the story's end, check out our official AG Horrors merch or grab your copy of our creepy books on Amazon. Don't forget to like, share, and catch up on past episodes, because the deeper you go, the darker it gets. Until the next episode, stay safe.